the roar of a restless crowd, the bright lights of a company in transition, a new kind of hero standing in the center of the ring, while the future of the World Wrestling Federation hung in the balance. The giants were fading. The cartoon certainty of the golden era was gone. In its place came faster matches, sharper personalities, and wrestlers who felt more human than superhero. This was a time of risk, a time of change, a time when WWE bet everything on a new generation. This is the history of the New Generation Era. First up, Mr. Perfect. Mr. Perfect was one of wrestling's greatest performers. He had everything Vince McMahon wanted in a champion: the looks, the talent, the charisma. But backstage politics destroyed his chances at the top prize. Despite being positioned as one of the company's premier heels with Bobby Heenan by his side, Vince never made him a world champion. This is the story of how Mr. Perfect's quest for wrestling perfection was sabotaged by the very people who should have supported him. Growing up around wrestling from before he could walk, Kurt faced the mixed blessing that came with being Larry, the Axe Hennig's son. His father was already a legend in the American Wrestling Association. Larry had made his name as a tough, no-nonsense competitor who could work with anyone and make them look good. He was respected by promoters and feared by opponents. But having a famous wrestling father meant living under enormous pressure and constant scrutiny. Every time young Kurt stepped foot in a gym or wrestling school, people watched him differently. They expected him to be as tough as his old man. They expected him to have that same natural instinct for the business. Most importantly, they expected him to prove he belonged there on his own merit, not just because of his last name. He excelled in football, baseball, and amateur wrestling at Robbinsdale High School in Minnesota, and was widely regarded by coaches as a college-level athlete. His baseball skills were equally strong, with scouts taking notice of his arm strength and batting ability. But it was amateur wrestling where he really stood out. He dominated his high school competition and showed the technical skills that would later make him famous. Teachers and coaches could see he was different from other athletes. He had that perfectionist mentality that pushed him to be better than everyone else. At Vern's training camp, he proved he wasn't just riding his father's coattails. The camp was known for being brutal. Vern would push wrestlers to their physical and mental limits. Many hopefuls quit within the first few weeks. Others were told they didn't have what it takes and were sent home. But Kurt graduated from Verna's famously demanding camp, displaying technical skills that impressed even veteran wrestlers who had been in the business for decades. His footwork was smooth. His timing was natural. Most importantly, he understood ring psychology in a way that usually takes years to develop. The Minnesota wrestling scene was brutal and competitive, with no room for nepotism or weakness. The AWA territory was home to some of the toughest wrestlers in the business. Veterans like Nick Bockwinkel, Bobby Heenan, and Rick Martel set the standard for excellence. If you couldn't work at their level, you wouldn't last long. Promoters had no patience for wrestlers who couldn't draw money or deliver quality matches. Family connections might get you a tryout, but they wouldn't keep you employed if you couldn't perform. Young wrestlers who couldn't cut it were quickly weeded out, regardless of their last name. Vern had seen plenty of wrestlers' sons try to follow in their father's footsteps. Most of them failed because they thought the name alone would carry them. They lacked the dedication and natural ability needed to succeed. The wrestling business has always been unforgiving to those who don't respect it or work hard enough to master it. But Kurt had something special that set him apart from other second-generation wrestlers. He had a combination of his father's toughness and his own perfectionist mentality. He wasn't satisfied with being good enough or just getting by on his name. He wanted to be the best at everything he did. This drive would later become the foundation of his Mr. Perfect character, but even as a teenager, people could see he had that obsessive need to excel. By age 20, he was ready to step into the ring professionally, carrying not just his father's legacy, but his own burning ambition. He had spent years preparing for this moment. The training was complete. The foundation was solid. But the real test was about to begin as he entered a wrestling world where reputation meant everything, and one mistake could end a career before it started. Making his professional debut on January 30th, 1980, at just 20 years old, Hennig stepped into the Territorial wrestling system where careers were made or broken. This wasn't like today's wrestling where one company controls everything. Back then, the country was divided into different wrestling territories. Each territory had its own promoter, its own stars, and its own way of doing business. A wrestler had to prove himself in multiple territories before anyone would consider him a real star. He worked in the Pacific Northwest and other territories far from his Minnesota home. He started as a babyface, the good guy that fans were supposed to cheer for. The crowds didn't know him yet. They didn't care about his famous father or his amateur wrestling credentials. All that mattered was what he could do between the ropes. Wrestling promoters were looking for one thing. Could this kid draw money and put on entertaining matches night after night? His brief 1981 stint in the WWE ended quickly, raising questions about whether he was ready for the big time or if he needed more seasoning. Vince McMahon Sr. was still running the company then, and he had strict standards for who could work in his territory. Hennig lasted only a few months before he was sent back to smaller territories. Some people saw this as a failure. Others viewed it as a learning experience. The truth was probably somewhere in between. He had the talent, but he wasn't polished enough yet for the biggest stage in wrestling. Returning to the AWA in 1982, he faced the challenge of proving himself without relying on his father's name. Verne Gagne gave him opportunities, but Verne was known for being tough on everyone, including wrestlers' sons. He had no patience for performers who couldn't live up to their potential. Hennig started at the bottom of the card, working preliminary matches before the main events. He had to earn respect from veteran wrestlers who had worked with his father. They watched him closely, looking for any sign that he thought he was better than them because of his family connections. The territorial system was unforgiving in ways that modern wrestling fans can't imagine. Wrestlers traveled from town to town, working multiple matches a week for small crowds with no guaranteed contracts or health insurance. They drove their own cars, paid for their own gas, and split hotel rooms to save money. If you got injured, you didn't get paid. If the crowds didn't like you, promoters stopped booking you. Hennig worked as an undercard talent early on and learned ring psychology from veterans who taught him the fundamentals that would serve him throughout his career. He studied how veteran wrestlers controlled crowds and told stories in the ring. He learned when to speed up the pace and when to slow things down. Most importantly, he discovered how to make his opponents look good while still getting himself over with the fans. This skill would become one of his greatest strengths throughout his entire career. His technical skills improved dramatically during this period, as he studied tape and worked with veteran performers. He spent hours watching matches from legendary wrestlers like Lou Thesz and Billy Robinson. He picked up subtle techniques that most wrestlers never bothered to learn. His footwork became smoother. His transitions between moves looked more natural. He developed that rare ability to make everything look effortless while actually working incredibly hard to perfect every detail. The grind was brutal, but it taught him how to work hurt, how to adapt to different crowds, and how to carry weaker wrestlers to better matches than they deserved. These lessons couldn't be taught in wrestling school. They had to be earned through years of experience in small towns across the country. By the mid-1980s, he had transformed from a promising rookie into a polished performer ready for main event status. The territorial system had forged him into something special, a wrestler who understood both the art and the business. Wrestling observers were starting to take notice of his work, and bigger opportunities were about to present themselves. The AWA World Heavyweight Championship became the prize that would define Hennig's career in territorial wrestling. The American Wrestling Association was Verne's baby. He had built it from nothing into one of the most respected wrestling territories in the country. Stars like Hulk Hogan, Jesse Ventura, and Rick Martel had all made their names there before moving on to bigger things. Now it was Hennig's turn to prove he belonged in that company. Teaming with Scott Hall to win the AWA World Tag Team Championship on January 18, 1986, was just the beginning of Hennig's rise to the top. Hall was already establishing himself as one of the smoothest workers in the business. He had natural charisma and could talk his way into any storyline. Together, they made a dangerous combination. Hennig brought the technical skills and family credibility. Hall brought the attitude and mic work. Their chemistry was obvious from their first match together. They understood each other's timing, and could anticipate what the other would do in any situation. The Tag Team Championship run showed Hennig could work at the main event level. He wasn't just carrying weaker wrestlers anymore. He was working with established stars and holding his own. The crowds responded to his confidence and athletic ability. Wrestling observers started writing about his potential as a singles star. Promoters in other territories began asking Verna about his availability for special attractions. Everything was building towards something bigger. The real test came when he pursued the AWA World Heavyweight Championship, facing the legendary Nick Bockwinkel, who had held the title for years. Bockwinkel was everything a world champion should be. He looked like money in his expensive suits. He could wrestle any style and make it look easy. Most importantly, he understood how to be a heel champion without killing business. Fans hated him, but they paid to see him lose. That's the mark of a great champion. When Hennig defeated Nick Bockwinkel for the AWA World Heavyweight Championship in May 1987, it felt like a genuine changing of the guard. His 53-week reign established him as one of the premier wrestlers in the territory system. This wasn't a short transitional reign or a fluke victory. He held the title for over a year, defending it against all comers. Every defense was a main event. Every match had to deliver because the AWA's reputation depended on their champion being able to work with anyone and make it look believable. Hennig's matches during this period showcased his incredible technical ability and natural charisma. The background research repeatedly praises his ability to adapt his style to any opponent. He could work lengthy technical matches with wrestlers like Bockwinkel, showcasing his mat skills and ring psychology. Against brawlers like Bruiser Brody, he could adjust to a more physical style without losing his technical edge. This versatility made him valuable to promoters who needed a champion capable of working with different types of wrestlers. His feuds with top stars like Jerry Lawler and Greg Gagne drew huge crowds throughout the Midwest. However, the AWA was declining in the late 1980s, which gave Hennig prominence but limited his long-term national exposure. The Lawler matches were particularly special because both men understood Southern-style psychology. They could work a crowd into a frenzy without relying on high spots or complex sequences. The Greg feud had built-in drama because of the Hennig family's history with Vern Gagne. Wrestling observers began to take notice, praising his in-ring psychology and storytelling ability. Dave Meltzer and other wrestling journalists started featuring his matches in their newsletters. They recognized that something special was happening in the AWA. By 1987, Vince McMahon was watching, recognizing that Hennig had everything needed to succeed on the national stage. The AWA had been his proving ground, but the wrestling world was changing rapidly. National expansion was the future, and Hennig would need more than just technical excellence to make his mark on a bigger stage. McMahon's creative team knew they had to build something bigger than just another talented wrestler. When Hennig arrived in the WWE in 1988, the company had big plans for him. But first they needed to create the perfect persona. McMahon's team had watched Hennig's work in the AWA. They saw his athletic ability and his natural arrogance. They recognized that he had the look and skills to be a top heel in their expanding national territory. But the WWE was different from the regional territories. Characters needed to be bigger and more defined. The Mr. Perfect character was a risk that could have destroyed Hennig's career before it started. Claiming to be perfect at everything could easily backfire if fans didn't buy into it. Wrestling fans were smart. They could spot a fake from a mile away. If Hennig couldn't back up his claims of perfection, the character would become a joke. Hennig reportedly did not initially like the Mr. Perfect gimmick and preferred a cowboy character, but he accepted and elevated the concept beyond what anyone expected. Vignettes started airing in October 1988, and Hennig debuted the character on TV as Mr. Perfect in early October 1988. The vignettes showing Perfect's athletic accomplishments were groundbreaking for their time, featuring real sports demonstrations that no other wrestler had attempted. His half-court basketball shots, perfect 300 bowling games, and catching Hail Mary passes weren't staged or edited. These were actual athletic feats that required genuine skill and practice. The vignettes even featured cameos from real sports figures, adding legitimacy to his claims of athletic superiority. Hennig would spend hours practicing these shots before filming. He treated each vignette like a wrestling match that he had to win. His perfectionist mentality extended beyond the wrestling ring into every aspect of his character. Those vignettes created the aura that would fuel a year-long undefeated run on television, establishing him as one of the most protected wrestlers in the company. The character worked because it was rooted in truth. Hennig really was an exceptional athlete who excelled at multiple sports. This authenticity came through on television in ways that scripted characters never could. Fans might hate Mr. Perfect's arrogance, but they couldn't argue with the evidence they saw on their screens. The character became believable because the man playing it actually possessed those abilities. His cocky, arrogant personality was the perfect heel character for the late 1980s WWE. The company was transitioning from regional territory wrestling to national entertainment. They needed villains who could generate heat from coast to coast. Mr. Perfect's attitude worked everywhere. Small-town fans hated his big city arrogance. City fans hated his claims of superiority. Everyone found something to dislike about this wrestler who thought he was better than them. Fans loved to hate him, but they also couldn't deny his incredible in-ring ability. This created the perfect dynamic for a heel wrestler. People paid to see him lose, but they also respected his skills enough to keep watching. He could work with fan favorites like Hulk Hogan and make them look good while still maintaining his heel character. The Mr. Perfect character was an instant hit, giving Hennig the platform he needed to showcase his talents on a national stage. Television audiences across the country were seeing his work for the first time. Wrestling magazines started featuring him on covers. Merchandise sales proved that fans were connecting with the character despite hating everything he represented. But with success came new pressures that would test every aspect of his perfect persona. Every match would carry enormous weight, and maintaining that image of perfection was about to become the biggest challenge of his career. The undefeated streak became the foundation of Mr. Perfect's entire character. Wrestling promoters love undefeated streaks because they create easy storylines and build anticipation for the eventual loss. But for the wrestler carrying that streak, every match becomes a potential disaster. One bad night, one blown spot, one backstage decision could end months of careful character building in a matter of minutes. Mr. Perfect remained unbeaten on television for over a year, making him one of the most protected wrestlers in the company. WWE booking protected the streak as a deliberate strategy to build him as a top heel. The company was expanding nationally, and they needed strong characters that fans could believe in. An undefeated wrestler was valuable because it gave the impression that their roster was filled with legitimate tough guys. Hennig's streak wasn't accidental. It was a calculated business decision designed to establish him as a major player. Every match carried the risk of ending the streak, and backstage politics often determined who would get that honor. Wrestling matches are predetermined, but the decision of who wins and loses involves complex negotiations between promoters, bookers, and sometimes the wrestlers themselves. Hennig's undefeated streak meant that every opponent knew they weren't going over. This could create resentment in the locker room if wrestlers felt they deserved a win more than Hennig deserved to keep his streak alive. His feuds with opponents like the Blue Blazer, Owen Hart working under a mask, and the Red Rooster, Terry Taylor, showcased his ability to make even mid-card opponents look credible. The Blue Blazer played a clean-cut superhero character that was the opposite of Mr. Perfect's arrogant persona. The Red Rooster was a solid wrestler who had been saddled with a ridiculous gimmick. Both men were talented performers who deserved better than their current positions. Working with Hennig gave them a chance to show what they could do in longer, more meaningful matches. The streak wasn't just about winning matches. It was about winning them in convincing fashion while maintaining his perfect persona. Hennig couldn't just barely squeeze out victories or win through lucky breaks. Every win had to look dominant and effortless. This required careful planning and execution. He had to work with his opponents to create matches that told the right story while protecting his character's credibility. One sloppy victory could damage months of character development. His first pinfall loss came at Madison Square Garden to the Ultimate Warrior on March 19, 1990, though this was a regional MSG event rather than national television. His first singles loss on national pay-per-view television came to Brutus Beefcake at WrestleMania 6. These milestones marked the calculated end of his unbeaten run. But by then, the damage was done. Mr. Perfect had been established as a legitimate threat to anyone on the roster. Fans began to anticipate who might finally defeat the perfect wrestler, creating natural storylines and feuds. The streak became its own attraction. Wrestling magazines speculated about potential opponents. Fans at live events would chant for their favorites to be the one to end the streak. This anticipation was valuable for the company because it kept people interested in Mr. Perfect's matches even when the outcomes were predictable. The streak established Mr. Perfect as a legitimate main event player, proving he could carry storylines and deliver consistently good matches against different types of opponents. He had credibility with both hardcore wrestling fans and casual viewers. Heenan would later become his manager and add a crucial mouthpiece to the act. But the real test of his perfect persona was about to come in the form of championship gold that would define his entire WWE career. Winning the Intercontinental Championship would prove whether his perfect persona could translate into championship success. The Intercontinental Championship was often considered a stepping stone to the WWE Championship, but for some wrestlers it became their career-defining achievement. In the wrestling world, the IC title carried special meaning. It was the championship for wrestlers who could work. Technical ability mattered more than size or politics. Champions like Ricky Steamboat, Randy Savage, and Honky Tonk Man had all used the title to establish their credentials. For Mr. Perfect, this championship would represent the pinnacle of his wrestling excellence. In May 1990, he won the vacant Intercontinental Championship, defeating Tito Santana in the tournament final. Santana was a respected veteran who had held the title twice before. He was known for his technical skills and his ability to work with anyone on the roster. The tournament format gave Hennig's victory additional credibility since he had to defeat multiple opponents to claim the vacant title. His victory was clean and decisive, establishing him as a legitimate champion from day one. He held the Intercontinental title for about 15 months, from May 1990 until August 1991, but questions lingered about whether this was as high as he would ever climb in the company. Backstage, wrestlers and office personnel were already discussing Hennig's future. Some believed he had everything needed to be WWE Champion. Others pointed to Vince McMahon's preference for larger, more physically imposing champions. The Intercontinental Championship had launched careers like Hulk Hogan's to the next level. Whether it would do the same for Hennig remained to be seen. His defenses against Big Boss Man at WrestleMania 7, Brutus Beefcake, and Kerry Von Erich showcased his versatility as a champion. The Beefcake matches were interesting because both men were heels, which created unique dynamics. Against power wrestlers, he used his speed and technical skills. Against technical wrestlers, he relied on his athleticism and ring psychology. This adaptability made him valuable to the company's booking team. Perfect's matches during this period were consistently rated among the best on every card he appeared on. Wrestling observers took notice of his work rate and consistency. He rarely had a bad match, even when working with wrestlers who had limited skills. His ability to carry weaker opponents to good matches made him an asset to the company. Promoters could put him in the ring with almost anyone and expect a solid performance that would entertain the crowd. The Intercontinental Championship was considered the workhorse belt that rewarded in-ring ability, and Hennig's technical skill fit the championship perfectly. His appearance at WrestleMania 7 demonstrated his importance to the company's biggest events. WrestleMania was the WWE's showcase event, and only top stars got meaningful spots on the card. His presence at WrestleMania confirmed his status as one of the company's premier performers. The title reign established him as the measuring stick for technical excellence in the WWE. Other wrestlers were compared to Mr. Perfect's standards. His matches set the bar for what an Intercontinental Championship defense should look like. Wrestling schools used his matches as teaching tools for students learning ring psychology and match structure. He became the standard that other technical wrestlers tried to reach. Behind the scenes, discussions about his future began to include potential main event programs and championship opportunities. office personnel started talking about him in the same conversations as Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior. His name came up when planners discussed long-term storylines and pay-per-view main events. The foundation was being laid for his eventual push to the top of the company. But one title defense would change everything about his career trajectory. What should have been another routine championship match would instead become both his greatest triumph and his most costly victory. SummerSlam, 1991, August 26th, Madison Square Garden was packed that night. The crowd was electric. Mr. Perfect had been Intercontinental Champion for over a year. He had beaten everyone they put in front of him. Bret Hart was the challenger, a technical wrestler from the famous Hart wrestling family. On paper, it looked like another routine defense for the Perfect wrestler. The match between Mr. Perfect and Bret Hart at SummerSlam. 1991 is still considered one of the greatest Intercontinental Championship matches ever. Wrestling historians study this match. They break down every move and every sequence. The technical wrestling was flawless. Both men understood ring psychology better than most wrestlers ever would. They told a complete story in 18 minutes. The crowd was invested from the opening bell to the final pinfall. What fans didn't know was that Hennig was wrestling with a broken tailbone and bulging discs, risking his career with every move. He had been dealing with back problems for months. The injury had gotten worse during recent matches. Doctors had told him to take time off. He refused because losing the title would hurt his position in the company. He decided to work through the pain and hope for the best. The pain was excruciating. Every bump hurt. Every time Hart lifted him for a move, Hennig felt sharp pains shooting through his spine. He couldn't let it show on his face. Wrestling fans can spot weakness immediately. If they sensed he was hurt, it would ruin the match and damage his character. He had to perform like everything was normal while his body was breaking down. The 18-minute classic showcased both men at their absolute best, with technical wrestling that few could match. Hart worked holds that looked devastating but were actually safe for both wrestlers. Hennig countered with moves that showed his athletic ability without putting too much stress on his injured back. They built the match slowly, adding intensity as it progressed. The crowd got louder with each near fall. Bret Hart won the match and the title at SummerSlam 1991. Hennig later revealed he had a broken tailbone and bulging discs and wrestled the match through excruciating pain. He wrestled through a broken tailbone and bulging discs, injuries that would significantly limit his in-ring future. What should have been a temporary setback became a permanent problem. His movement in the ring was never the same. He couldn't take the bumps he used to take. High-impact moves became impossible. Wrestling observers gave the match 5 stars, and Bret Hart later called it one of his best matches. Dave Meltzer and other respected journalists rated it highly. The match was featured on highlight reels and best-of compilations. But while everyone celebrated the artistic achievement, Hennig was dealing with the physical consequences that would change his entire career trajectory. His transition to commentary and behind-the-scenes roles was presented as a choice, but it was really a medical necessity. The company told fans that Mr. Perfect was taking on new responsibilities. They said he wanted to expand his role beyond just wrestling. The truth was that his body couldn't handle full-time wrestling anymore. He needed time to heal and figure out what came next. The match that should have elevated both men instead became the moment when Mr. Perfect's championship dreams began to fade. Hart went on to bigger things. He eventually won the WWE Championship and became one of the company's top stars. For Hennig, this match represented the peak of his in-ring career. Everything after this would be a struggle against his own physical limitations. The injury would force him to reinvent his role in the company, but it also robbed wrestling of one of its greatest performers. Yet, even with his body failing him, the real obstacles to his championship aspirations weren't just physical. The decisions that would truly determine his fate were being made in places where fans never looked. Wrestling boardrooms and backstage conversations determine careers in ways fans never understand. And for Mr. Perfect, those decisions crushed his championship dreams. Wrestling fans only see what happens in the ring and on television. They don't know about the meetings where careers are made or destroyed. They don't hear the conversations between promoters and bookers that determine who gets pushed and who gets buried. For Curt Hennig, these behind-the-scenes decisions would cost him the one thing he wanted most: the WWE Championship. Multiple sources and people in the business say Hennig was never seriously pushed to the WWE Championship. Contemporaries point to Vince McMahon's preference for larger, more marketable champions and backstage politics as important factors. This was shocking to people in the wrestling business who watched his work. He had everything a world champion needed. He could work with anyone. He could cut decent promos. He had the look and the athletic ability. Most importantly, he drew money and got reactions from crowds everywhere he went. But none of that mattered if the boss didn't see him as championship material. The reasons varied depending on who you asked in the wrestling business. Some people said it was his size that worked against him. McMahon had always preferred larger champions like Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior. Hennig was around 6 feet tall and weighed about 260 pounds. That made him bigger than most wrestlers, but not big enough for McMahon's vision of what a world champion should look like. Others pointed to backstage heat and political issues that created problems for Hennig's career advancement. McMahon's preference for larger, more physically imposing champions worked against Hennig throughout his career. The boss wanted champions who looked like superheroes or movie stars. He wanted wrestlers who would photograph well and look impressive on television. Hennig was athletic and good-looking, but he didn't have the massive physique that McMahon associated with main event stars. This preference wasn't unusual in wrestling, but it limited opportunities for talented wrestlers who didn't fit the physical mold. Reports suggest that promises of a world title push were made but never fulfilled, leading to frustration and resentment. People in the wrestling business talked about conversations where Hennig was told his time would come. He was assured that the company had big plans for him. These promises kept him motivated and loyal to the organization. But months turned into years, and the promised push never materialized. This created tension and disappointment that affected his relationship with management. He feuded with Hogan during his heel run. Later, in late 1992, he turned babyface, notably teaming with Randy Savage at Survivor Series 1992 in a bid to re-establish singles momentum. Turning Hennig from heel to babyface was a major decision. The Mr. Perfect character had been successful as a villain. Changing that dynamic was risky. Some people believed this was management's way of testing whether Hennig could work as a top good guy. Others saw it as a desperate attempt to salvage his main event potential after years of political problems. Backstage politics in the WWE were notoriously complex during this period. Multiple factors influenced who got pushed and who didn't. Personal relationships mattered. Political alliances affected booking decisions. Some wrestlers had agents or advocates who fought for their interests. Others had to navigate the system on their own. Success required more than just wrestling ability. It required understanding how to play the backstage game and build the right relationships. Sources paint a mixed picture. Hennig was widely respected and generous with knowledge, but his perfectionism and frankness may have created friction in some backstage relationships. His attention to detail and high standards were assets in the ring, but those same qualities could make him difficult to work with behind the scenes. He expected everyone to meet his level of professionalism. When they didn't, he wasn't afraid to speak up. Hennig cashed a Lloyd's of London disability policy tied to his post-injury condition. Later disputes over payments and his frustration with how the company handled his return contributed to tensions that factored into his jump to WCW. The combination of injury and politics effectively ended his chances of ever becoming WWE Champion, despite having all the tools to succeed. His back problems limited his in-ring time just when he needed to be at his best. At the same time, backstage issues prevented him from getting the opportunities he deserved. By the mid-1990s, it became clear that Hennig would need to look elsewhere for the career revival that had eluded him in the WWE. He jumped to WCW in mid-1997 and reintroduced himself under his real name, hoping the Monday Night Wars would offer the main event opportunities that had eluded him. Wrestling fans love comeback stories. They want to see their heroes overcome obstacles and find success in new places. When Curt Hennig left the WWE, many people hoped that World Championship Wrestling would give him the push he never got up north. The Monday Night Wars were at their peak. WCW was signing big names and giving them main event opportunities. It seemed like the perfect time for Hennig to reinvent himself. Eric Bischoff was running WCW, and he was willing to spend money to compete with Vince McMahon. The company was signing former WWE stars and putting them in prominent positions. Hennig's reputation as a technical wrestler made him attractive to WCW bookers. They saw him as someone who could work with their younger talent and help elevate the overall quality of their matches. The timing seemed perfect for a fresh start in a company that valued wrestling ability. Joining the Four Horsemen and later the NWO showed he could still adapt to new situations, but his physical limitations were becoming more apparent. The Four Horsemen were WCW's most prestigious stable. Being invited to join meant the company viewed him as a main event caliber performer. He worked alongside Ric Flair, Chris Benoit, and Dean Malenko. These were wrestlers who appreciated technical excellence and ring psychology. Later, his inclusion in the NWO Wolfpack gave him another high-profile storyline. But people who worked with him noticed he wasn't the same physically. He won the United States Heavyweight Championship in 1997, proving he could still carry feuds and draw money when healthy. His back issues limited what he could do, but he still had strong programs with Diamond Dallas Page and Chris Benoit. The DDP matches were particularly good because both men understood how to work around physical limitations. Page had his own injury history and knew how to structure matches that looked spectacular without being overly dangerous. The Benoit feuds showcased technical wrestling at its finest. Working with him brought out the best in Hennig's remaining abilities. The physical demands that had once been second nature now required careful management and constant pain medication. Success in WCW extended his career, but it couldn't recapture the magic of his Mr. Perfect years. The man who had once embodied wrestling perfection was fighting battles that went far beyond what fans could see on television. The real tragedy began long before anyone realized how serious his problems had become. Curt Hennig had everything a wrestler could want: talent, charisma, athletic ability, and the respect of his peers. But success in wrestling often comes with a price that fans never see. Behind the perfect character and technical excellence was a man struggling with pain that went far beyond what happened in the ring. Hennig battled chronic pain after his SummerSlam injuries, used prescription painkillers for years, and the medical examiner ruled his death on February 10, 2003 as acute cocaine intoxication. His father later said steroids and painkillers contributed. The back injury from his match with Bret Hart never fully healed. What started as legitimate medical treatment became something much darker. The pills helped him get through matches and appearances, but they also created a dependency that would haunt him for years. The chronic pain affected everything in his life. Simple activities became difficult. Sleep was often impossible. The man who had once been a perfect athlete could barely get through a normal day without medication. He tried different treatments and therapies, but nothing gave him lasting relief. Wrestling had given him fame and money, but it had also destroyed his body in ways that couldn't be repaired. Reports also document run-ins with the law and increasing personal problems in his later years. Financial problems created stress and embarrassment. The perfectionist who had once demanded excellence from everyone around him was falling apart. Friends and family watched helplessly as he struggled with demons that were bigger than any wrestling storyline. His death at age 44 shocked the wrestling world and highlighted the industry's darker side. The news hit the wrestling community like a punch to the gut. Here was a man who had entertained millions of fans and inspired countless wrestlers. He was gone at an age when he should have been enjoying retirement or working as a trainer. Years of prescription drug abuse had led to harder substances. The pain that started with a wrestling injury had consumed his entire life. His influence on technical wrestling and heel psychology can still be seen in today's performers. Wrestlers study his matches to learn timing and storytelling. His ability to make opponents look good while staying strong himself became a template that others follow. The Mr. Perfect character showed how arrogance could be entertaining when backed up by genuine skill. Modern heels still use techniques that Hennig perfected decades ago. The SummerSlam. 1991 match with Bret Hart remains a masterclass in wrestling storytelling and technical execution. Wrestling schools use this match to teach students about psychology and pacing. Every move had a purpose. Every sequence built toward the conclusion. It represents everything that was great about Hennig's approach to wrestling. Technical excellence combined with emotional storytelling that connected with audiences. His son Curtis Axel's WWE career keeps the Hennig name alive, though he never reached his father's heights. Curtis inherited some of his father's athletic ability and ring awareness. But lightning rarely strikes twice in wrestling families. The expectations were enormous and probably unfair. Still, seeing a Hennig in a WWE ring reminds fans of what his father accomplished and what might have been. He was posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2007, with peers including Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan widely noted for praising his work and contributions to the business. His family accepted the honor on his behalf. Wrestling legends spoke about his talent and his impact on the industry. But everyone in that room knew this should have been Curt Hennig's moment to celebrate a career well-lived. Wrestling historians consistently rank Mr. Perfect among the greatest performers never to win a world championship. The man who claimed to be perfect was ultimately all too human, with flaws and circumstances that shaped a career filled with both triumph and unfulfilled promise. The lessons from Curt Hennig's career extend far beyond his individual story. Many peers and historians view Hennig as one of the best performers never to win a world title. His in-ring excellence, injuries, and backstage dynamics combined to keep him from reaching the top. His technical excellence and character work set a standard that wrestlers still strive to match today. Wrestlers and trainers still study his matches. His SummerSlam '91 bout with Bret Hart is a teaching tool for timing and psychology. The real tragedy isn't just that he died young at 44. The tragedy is that circumstances prevented him from achieving his full potential when he was at his peak. Wrestling lost one of its greatest performers. Next up, Scott Hall. Scott Hall was one of wrestling's most charismatic performers, revolutionizing the business when he formed the NWO. He went from being a struggling mid-carder to becoming the bad guy Razor Ramon, a cultural icon who carried the Intercontinental Championship with style and swagger. In 2022, at 63 years old, he passed away after being taken off life support. Scott Hall was no doubt one of the greatest, but one question remains unanswered. Why WWE never gave him a world title run? In 1958, Scott Oliver Hall was born in St. Mary's County, Maryland, beginning a nomadic childhood that few could imagine. As the son of a military man constantly receiving new orders, young Scott found himself uprooted and replanted in unfamiliar soil nearly every year until he was 15. Though wrestling captivated his imagination from an early age, the path to the squared circle wasn't immediately clear. After graduation, Scott drifted through life like a ship without anchor, taking whatever work would pay the bills. His imposing frame and natural intimidation factor made him perfect for security work, and he found steady employment guarding the doors of various bars and nightclubs, keeping watch over the rowdy nightlife scene. But fate has a way of violently redirecting our paths when we least expect it. In 1983, while working security at an Orlando nightclub, Hall's life changed forever during one fateful shift. What began as routine crowd control escalated into a life-or-death struggle that ended with Hall firing his weapon in self-defense. The patron died from his wounds. Though initially charged with second-degree murder, the case was eventually dismissed when investigators confirmed Hall had acted to protect himself. But legal exoneration couldn't erase the psychological damage. This traumatic incident would cast a long shadow across Hall's future. His closest confidant, Kevin Nash, would later point to this moment as the catalyst for the demons that would eventually hunt Hall throughout his career, the addiction issues that nearly consumed him. How do you move forward when you've taken a life, even justifiably? It's a question Hall would spend decades trying to answer. Seeking escape and reinvention, Hall made the pivotal decision to pursue professional wrestling in 1984. Championship Wrestling from Florida recognized the untapped potential in this physically imposing newcomer with natural charisma. Immediately, they thrust him into the spotlight with a high-profile feud against the legendary Dusty Rhodes, baptism by fire for any wrestling rookie. What followed was a wrestling education unlike any other, as Hall traversed the territory system alongside tag team partner Dan Spivey, absorbing different styles and approaches, building the foundation for what would become one of wrestling's most influential careers. In 1985, after bouncing between promotions like a pinball, including stops at Jim Crockett Promotions in the Carolinas and Midwest Wrestling Association in Missouri, Hall landed in what many consider wrestling's prestigious finishing school, Vern Gaines' American Wrestling Association. This wasn't just another territory. The AWA stood as one of wrestling's powerhouse organizations, a breeding ground for superstars where legends were forged. Here, Hall underwent his first major character transformation. Who was this mustachioed powerhouse commanding attention? None other than Magnum Scott Hall, a fan favorite whose uncanny resemblance to television heartthrob Tom Selleck became his calling card. Behind the scenes, something remarkable was happening. Vern Gaines, with his legendary eye for talent, saw something special in Hall that few others had recognized. Whispers circulated throughout the locker room that Gagne believed he'd discovered his next Hulk Hogan, the superstar who'd slipped through his fingers years earlier. How serious was Gagne about this vision? Serious enough to personally instruct Hall to incorporate Hogan-esque moves and mannerisms into his performances, hoping lightning might strike twice. The strategy initially paid dividends. Hall's career trajectory soared as he formed a formidable partnership with the technically brilliant Curt Hennig, creating magic in the ring night after night. When that alliance eventually dissolved, Hall didn't miss a beat, transitioning seamlessly into singles competition where he quickly ascended the ranks. Before long, this former drifter found himself standing across the ring from legendary champions like the fearsome Stan Hansen and the technically superior Rick Martel, challenging for wrestling's most coveted prize, the AWA World Championship. What made Hall different from other physically imposing wrestlers wasn't just his look or his size. It was an intangible quality that made fans believe in him, a natural charisma that couldn't be taught. Though championship gold remained just beyond his grasp during this period, something more valuable was happening. Scott Hall was becoming a complete performer, developing the tools that would eventually make him one of wrestling's most influential figures. By 1989, Scott Hall's wrestling instincts weren't limited to the ring. His business acumen had sharpened too. Despite his growing popularity in the AWA, Hall recognized the warning signs: dwindling crowds, bounced paychecks, and an organization struggling to stay relevant in a rapidly changing industry. The once mighty AWA was taking on water fast. Would you stay aboard a sinking vessel when your career was at stake? What followed was a professional wrestler's version of a world tour, as Hall transformed himself into a wrestling nomad, testing waters across the globe. His journey began with a 6-month stint at World Championship Wrestling, where he first crossed paths with the Atlanta-based promotion that would later define his legacy. But the odyssey was just beginning. Like a master craftsman seeking new techniques, Hall expanded his wrestling education overseas. He battled in the technically demanding rings of New Japan Pro Wrestling, where Western showmanship met Eastern fighting spirit. Then it was off to Germany's Catch Wrestling Association, where the hard-hitting European style added new weapons to his arsenal. The sun-soaked arenas of Puerto Rico's World Wrestling Council saw him perform before passionate Caribbean crowds. He even participated in a WWE tryout that, puzzlingly, didn't immediately lead to a contract. What were they missing that they'd later regret? By 1991, Hall's compass pointed him back to WCW, where his evolution continued with the birth of the Diamond Stud, a character dripping with arrogance and machismo that channeled the cocky essence of Rick Rude. With the flamboyant Diamond Dallas Page as his manager and mouthpiece, this new incarnation of Hall cut through WCW's mid-card talent like Tommy Rich and Tom Zenk with devastating efficiency. It was during this return to WCW that wrestling history quietly began writing its most influential chapter. Hall formed a brief but significant partnership with another imposing figure using the moniker Vinny Vegas, none other than Kevin Nash. Though neither man could have known it then, this temporary alliance was merely the prelude to a friendship that would eventually reshape the wrestling industry. Despite finding his groove in WCW, when opportunity knocked in the form of a WWE contract in May 1992, Hall didn't hesitate. Sometimes success requires perfect timing, and Hall sensed that his moment had arrived. With his bags packed and his sights set on the biggest wrestling company in the world, Scott Hall prepared to answer the most important call of his career, one that would transform him from a wrestling journeyman into a household name. In May 1992, Scott Hall stepped onto WWE's grand stage as Razor Ramon, a character that would forever change wrestling history. But here's what makes it fascinating. This wasn't just another gimmick handed down from creative. The slick-talking, gold chain-wearing bad guy sprang directly from Hall's own imagination after immersing himself in Al Pacino's iconic portrayal of Tony Montana in Scarface. How many wrestlers create their own defining personas? Say hello to the bad guy. With those words, delivered in his perfect Pacino-inspired Cuban accent, Hall instantly captivated audiences. While other newcomers struggled to find their footing, Razor Ramon exploded onto the scene with a fully realized character. His methodical dismantling of WWE's undercard talent wasn't just about winning matches. It was calculated character building that made him look absolutely lethal. Each toothpick flicked at fallen opponents told a story of arrogance and superiority that audiences couldn't ignore. Something unexpected started happening during those early months. Despite being positioned as a villain, fans couldn't help but admire him. What makes certain bad guys so irresistible? Razor's swagger, confidence, and undeniable coolness made him one of wrestling's earliest examples of a cool heel. Someone fans secretly cheered despite their villainous actions. His perfectly slicked-back hair, dazzling gold chains, and signature catchphrases created an aura that transcended traditional wrestling roles. WWE recognized they had something special and wasted no time throwing their new acquisition into the deep end. On September 14, 1992, primetime wrestling viewers witnessed Razor Ramon insert himself into wrestling royalty when he cost the beloved Macho Man Randy Savage a crucial match against the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Interfering against a legend like Savage wasn't just any debut feud. It was an immediate signal that management viewed Hall as main event material. This high-profile rivalry culminated at that year's Survivor Series, where the wrestling world witnessed something extraordinary: a tag team collision featuring Razor and Flair battling against Savage and Mr. Perfect. Can you imagine a better spotlight for a newcomer? Sharing the ring with three certified legends, Hall didn't just keep pace, he belonged there. The match accomplished exactly what it needed to, establishing Razor Ramon as more than just another new face. He was a superstar destined for greatness. Behind that confident smirk and those intimidating eyes, Scott Hall was proving what insiders had long suspected. He possessed one of wrestling's most brilliant creative minds. His innate understanding of character development, psychology, and presentation was creating something that would resonate with fans for decades to come. Little did anyone know, Razor Ramon was just the beginning of Scott Hall's revolutionary impact on professional wrestling. Following his impressive showing against Macho Man, Vince McMahon fast-tracked Razor Ramon straight into WWE's championship picture. The 1993 Royal Rumble saw the bad guy challenge none other than technical mastermind Bret "Hitman" Hart for the coveted WWE Championship. Although Hall didn't capture the gold that night, something more valuable occurred. The match convinced skeptics that this newcomer belonged in main events. By summer 1993, fan reaction had become impossible to ignore. WWE executives recognized a golden opportunity when a seemingly routine match against an unknown jobber named the 1-2-3 Kid created magic. Remember that shocking moment when the undersized underdog somehow pinned the mighty Razor Ramon on Monday Night Raw? The upset victory didn't just launch Sean Waltman's career, it provided the perfect storyline catalyst for Hall's character evolution. Instead of responding with anger, Razor showed unexpected sportsmanship. His growing respect for the young upstart who had embarrassed him transformed naturally into a full babyface turn. Fans who had been secretly cheering could now openly embrace the bad guy as one of their favorites. The former rivals even formed an unlikely partnership, teaming together against common enemies. Behind the curtain, something equally significant was developing. The on-screen partnership between Hall and Waltman mirrored a growing real-life friendship. They soon found themselves gravitating toward like-minded performers, Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, and an up-and-coming Triple H. Together, they formed what wrestling insiders would come to know as the Clique. This wasn't just another backstage friendship. The Clique quietly accumulated unprecedented influence within WWE's power structure. Their collective star power, creative input, and strategic positioning gave them the kind of backstage pull that wrestling had rarely seen before. At times, industry veterans wondered who truly controlled WWE's direction. Was it Vince McMahon or this tight-knit group of performers who protected each other's interests? How much control should wrestlers have over their own storylines? As Razor Ramon's popularity soared on screen, Scott Hall's backstage influence grew proportionally. The cool character fans adored, and the shrewd businessman behind it were both ascending simultaneously, setting the stage for one of wrestling's most consequential careers, and one of its most turbulent personal journeys. The moment Scott Hall truly cemented his place in WWE history was on October 11, 1993, when he defeated former AWA rival Rick Martel to claim his first Intercontinental Championship. It wasn't just another title change, it was validation. After years of wandering the wrestling landscape, Hall had not only found his perfect character but earned championship gold that proved his exceptional talent. But a championship reign rarely comes without controversy. When suspended former champion Shawn Michaels returned, he brought an unexpected claim. Since no one had actually defeated him for the title, wasn't he still the rightful champion? 2 championship belts, 2 elite performers, and one unprecedented solution. How would WWE determine the true champion? The answer revolutionized professional wrestling forever. At WrestleMania 10, Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels climbed into Madison Square Garden and shattered expectations in WWE's first-ever pay-per-view ladder match. While modern fans might take ladder matches for granted, imagine being in that arena witnessing something completely new. What happens when 2 of wrestling's most innovative minds are given freedom to create without a blueprint to follow? Magic happened. Their bodies told a story of risk, sacrifice, and championship desire that transcended traditional wrestling. Each painful impact and death-defying leap served a greater narrative purpose. Though Razor emerged victorious as the undisputed Intercontinental Champion, both men walked away as winners. They'd created a template that wrestlers would follow for decades to come. How do you follow up perfection? Razor's momentum carried him into a program with another Clique member, Diesel. Their contrasting styles, Ramon's technical prowess against Nash's raw power, created compelling television throughout the remainder of 1994, further elevating the Intercontinental Championship's prestige. Behind Hall's confident smirk lay a performer at the absolute peak of his powers, respected by peers, adored by fans, and pioneering new forms of in-ring storytelling that would influence generations of wrestlers. The question wasn't if Scott Hall would leave a legacy, but how monumental that legacy would become. Scott Hall's career reached a turning point after his SummerSlam 1995 ladder match with Shawn Michaels. Despite delivering wrestling classics against opponents like Jeff Jarrett, frustration quietly built as Hall watched his friends Nash and Michaels ascend to world championship status while he remained locked in the upper mid-card. The breaking point came when Hall directly approached Vince McMahon, asking what more he could do to reach the next level. McMahon's response was devastating. This was it. In McMahon's vision, Razor Ramon had reached his permanent position in the hierarchy. Meanwhile, WCW's Eric Bischoff was aggressively recruiting WWE talent with Ted Turner's financial backing. Hall wasn't just creatively frustrated. Kevin Nash revealed that financial concerns played a major role too, with both men feeling underpaid despite their drawing power. By early 1996, both Hall and Nash submitted their resignations to WWE. Their final appearance would become wrestling legend, the infamous curtain call incident at Madison Square Garden, where the Clique broke character to embrace publicly, shattering wrestling's sacred kayfabe. With his WWE contract expired and determined to prove his true value, Scott Hall prepared to make one of the most industry-altering impacts in professional wrestling history. What followed would shake professional wrestling to its core. On May 27, 1996, during an episode of Monday Nitro, Scott Hall emerged unexpectedly from the crowd. Dressed in street clothes rather than wrestling gear, he calmly stepped into the ring, grabbed a microphone, and delivered one of wrestling's most iconic promos. With his distinctive swagger, he warned WCW that he and some friends were coming to take over. 2 weeks later, Kevin Nash joined him, solidifying what fans would come to know as the Outsiders. The brilliance of this angle was its blurring of reality and fiction. Though both men were legitimately no longer employed by WWE, the storyline implied they were invaders sent by the competition. This worked-shoot approach created unprecedented buzz throughout the wrestling world. Were these actual WWE wrestlers invading? Was this real? The ambiguity fueled fan speculation and dramatically boosted ratings. Then came the moment that truly changed wrestling forever. At Bash at the Beach on July 7th, Hall and Nash promised a mystery partner for their six-man tag match. When Hulk Hogan, wrestling's biggest hero for over a decade, emerged as their ally and turned villain for the first time since becoming a mainstream star, the audience's shock was palpable. As fans pelted the ring with garbage, Hogan proclaimed the formation of the New World Order, declaring war on WCW. The NWO storyline transcended typical wrestling narratives. Its gritty realism, cool factor, and anti-establishment attitude perfectly captured the emerging cultural zeitgeist of the late 1990s. The angle was so convincing that local authorities occasionally received calls reporting real assaults when NWO members attacked wrestlers backstage. People who had never watched wrestling before suddenly couldn't look away. Behind the scenes, Hall's creative fingerprints were all over the NWO concept. His understanding of character psychology, storytelling, and what fans truly wanted to see helped craft what many consider wrestling's most influential angle. The storyline didn't just change WCW, it forced WWE to evolve into the Attitude Era and transformed how wrestling stories would be told for generations to come. But Hall's creative genius extended beyond his own character. The NWO needed a worthy adversary, and it was reportedly Scott Hall who conceived what would become one of wrestling's most iconic transformations. At his suggestion, Sting abandoned his colorful surfer persona and emerged as a silent, brooding vigilante inspired by Brandon Lee's character in The Crow. This reinvention created the perfect counterbalance to the NWO's chaos, a dark avenger lurking in the rafters, waiting to deliver justice. Before that epic confrontation would materialize, the NWO continued expanding its ranks. The faction welcomed Scott's old friend Sean Waltman, now competing as Six, further strengthening the original Outsiders core. With their growing army, Hall and Nash dominated WCW's tag team division, capturing the tag team championships an impressive 6 times. Their battles against legendary teams like Harlem Heat, the technically superior Steiner brothers, and the prestigious Four Horsemen produced some of the era's most memorable matches. But as Hall's professional star reached its zenith, his personal demons grew increasingly difficult to conceal. The substance abuse issues that had followed him throughout his career intensified dramatically without WWE's strict oversight. What began as a controlled habit escalated into a dependency that became painfully apparent even to television viewers. His speech slurred during promos, his movements grew erratic, and his once imposing physique began deteriorating before fans' eyes. By March 1998, the situation had become so dire that WCW was forced to remove him from television entirely, mandating rehabilitation treatment. Despite the company's intervention efforts, Hall's addiction proved too powerful. When he eventually returned to Monday Nitro, the improvements were temporary at best. Fans who had cheered his character's rebellion now watched with genuine concern as the man behind Razor Ramon fought a much more serious battle outside the ring. By 1999, Hall had become nearly invisible on WCW programming, his appearances rare and concerning. In a deeply misguided decision that revealed the company's ethical bankruptcy, they attempted to monetize his struggles by rebranding him as Last Call Scott Hall, complete with an alcoholic gimmick that saw him stumbling to the ring with drink in hand. This exploitation of a man's genuine addiction marked a dark chapter for wrestling storytelling. By February 2000, following a defeat by Sid at Super Brawl 10, Hall vanished from WCW permanently. His subsequent career became a series of brief, troubled appearances. He surfaced briefly in Extreme Championship Wrestling and attempted runs in New Japan, but these stints only highlighted his deteriorating condition. Fans who had once marveled at his in-ring psychology now witnessed a performer clearly struggling to function. Wrestling seemed to offer an unexpected lifeline in 2002. WWE, having purchased WCW's assets the previous year, decided to resurrect the NWO concept with its original members. At February's No Way Out pay-per-view, Hall, Nash, and Hogan returned to WWE programming, interfering in Stone Cold Steve Austin's world title match against Chris Jericho. The resulting program between Hall and Austin held immense potential on paper, two of wrestling's most influential characters finally colliding. In reality, what could have been a dream match years earlier now felt hollow, with Hall clearly battling his personal demons throughout. Their WrestleMania 18 encounter disappointed expectations, remembered primarily for Hall's exaggerated selling of Austin's finishing move rather than for competitive excellence. Behind the spectacular character and innovative mind existed a man fighting battles far more challenging than any wrestling opponent. The contrast between the charismatic performer who revolutionized wrestling and the struggling individual behind the character revealed the profound human cost hidden beneath wrestling's theatrical exterior. After WrestleMania, the NWO storyline crumbled when Hulk Hogan unexpectedly turned babyface and abandoned the group. Desperate to salvage their momentum, Hall and Nash recruited fellow Clique member Sean Waltman once again, attempting to recapture their faction's former glory. But the angle had lost its spark. By summer, WWE quietly dropped the NWO from television altogether. For Scott Hall, the end came even sooner. On May 7th, his WWE return came to an abrupt halt following the notorious plane ride from hell incident. During the transatlantic flight returning from England, Hall's behavior reportedly spiraled out of control. Alongside several other wrestlers, his actions created such chaos that WWE executives had finally reached their breaking point. The company terminated his contract immediately. Unemployed once again, Hall surveyed a wrestling landscape with increasingly limited options. He eventually landed in the fledgling Total Nonstop Action Wrestling promotion, making sporadic appearances during their 2002 launch period. These brief TNA stints continued through 2004 and 2005, though never developing into consistent programming. The years between major appearances weren't entirely lost time. Behind the scenes, Hall engaged in multiple attempts at rehabilitation. Though lasting sobriety remained elusive, these efforts demonstrated his awareness of his condition and desire to improve. Each attempt to get clean represented a personal battle far more challenging than any in-ring confrontation. On November 1, 2007, a healthier-looking Scott Hall returned to TNA television. Fans witnessed a meaningful reunion as he joined forces with longtime friend Kevin Nash to battle the Angle Alliance. For those who had followed Hall's struggles, seeing him back in action, even temporarily, provided a glimmer of hope that the man behind the wrestler might finally be winning his most important fight. Following that brief return, Hall's reliability issues resurfaced when he no-showed scheduled appearances, severely damaging his relationship with TNA. The promotion kept him off television until January 2010, when he made a surprise comeback to form the band with Nash and Waltman, a thinly veiled recreation of their NWO Clique glory days. Despite Hulk Hogan's storyline attempts to remove Hall and Waltman from TNA programming, the band continued their disruptive path, launching attacks on various roster members. Their chaos culminated on May 13th, when the reunited Outsiders captured the TNA World Tag Team Championships. However, their reign would be short-lived. By June 14th, TNA stripped them of the titles following Hall's release from the company. Once again, Hall's ongoing substance abuse problems had derailed his career. This time, however, he recognized his desperate need for intervention. In a moment of clarity, he reached out to WWE, taking advantage of their policy that funded rehabilitation for former talent regardless of their current employment status. This rehabilitation stay revealed a shocking medical complication. After battling a serious case of double pneumonia, doctors diagnosed Hall with epilepsy, a condition likely triggered by years of alcohol abuse. This diagnosis required him to begin a daily regimen of medications to control seizures, adding another layer of complexity to his already challenging health situation. And as if that wasn't bad enough, Hall also required a pacemaker during this period, creating yet another life-threatening health concern. His survival now depended on maintaining sobriety and following strict medical protocols, a challenge that proved overwhelming. Despite his awareness of these dangers, addiction's grip remained powerful. The following years brought multiple relapses, including a frightening April 2011 hospitalization after suffering cardiac issues triggered by an overdose. In 2013, when Hall's prospects seemed bleakest, salvation arrived through an unexpected source: Diamond Dallas Page. By this time, DDP had transformed himself from wrestling star to wellness advocate, having already helped Jake the Snake Roberts achieve sobriety after decades of substance abuse. When Page extended the same lifeline to Hall, offering him residence at his Atlanta home and a chance at rehabilitation, Hall recognized this might be his final opportunity. The transformation that followed was nothing short of remarkable. Within months, the physical and mental improvements were visible to everyone. Through a comprehensive approach combining therapy, detoxification, and DDP's innovative yoga program, Page accomplished what numerous rehabilitation facilities couldn't. He helped Scott Hall reclaim his life. The wrestling community rallied around Hall's recovery efforts. Through crowdfunding, DDP raised nearly $110,000 to cover essential medical procedures Hall desperately needed: hip replacement surgery and extensive dental work. These interventions addressed years of physical neglect and helped restore not just Hall's health but his dignity. The transformation in Scott Hall was nothing short of miraculous. Now sober and healthier than he'd been in decades, he re-emerged into the wrestling world to find an overwhelming outpouring of support from fans and industry colleagues alike. His journey toward redemption reached a powerful milestone in 2014 when WWE announced his induction into their Hall of Fame under the Razor Ramon persona. On April 5, 2014, Hall received his long-overdue recognition in a deeply emotional ceremony. Surrounded by his Click brothers on stage, he delivered one of wrestling's most memorable induction speeches, his signature catchphrase: "Bad times don't last, but bad guys do," taking on profound new meaning. The celebration wasn't just about his in-ring achievements. It marked the triumph of a man who had fought his way back from the edge of destruction. Since that night, with occasional minor setbacks, Hall has maintained his sobriety. The transformation extended beyond physical health, revealing a man at peace with both his legendary contributions to wrestling and his personal journey. His pride shifted to watching his son Cody Hall forge his own path in promotions like New Japan Pro Wrestling and Pro Wrestling Noah. Hall hasn't vanished completely from wrestling. He makes periodic appearances at WWE events, typically alongside his former Click or NWO teammates. These nostalgic moments remind fans of his enduring impact, not just as a consistently excellent performer when healthy, but as one of wrestling's most brilliant creative minds who developed iconic characters and played an instrumental role in crafting the revolutionary NWO storyline that changed professional wrestling forever. Why did Scott Hall never become world champion? This is perhaps wrestling's most fascinating what-if scenario. When Hall debuted as Razor Ramon, WWE immediately positioned him alongside main event talents like Ric Flair and Randy Savage. Throughout his WWE run, he remained at the near pinnacle of the card, delivering classic matches and memorable feuds. His Intercontinental Championship ladder matches with Shawn Michaels revolutionized the industry. The puzzle pieces were all there. Hall possessed the perfect combination of size, in-ring ability, and charisma. His microphone work was exceptional, and fans responded to him whether as heel or face. Yet the World Championship remained elusive. In WWE, timing worked against him. The company was investing heavily in Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and Diesel as their champions during Hall's peak years. When Hall approached Vince McMahon about advancing beyond the upper mid-card, McMahon's response revealed the ceiling WWE had placed on him. WCW presented new opportunities, but new obstacles emerged. As a founding NWO member, Hall became one of wrestling's biggest stars during the industry's hottest period. However, the spotlight often centered on Hogan, while Hall's escalating personal struggles made him increasingly unreliable. Jim Ross often said reliability was wrestling's most crucial trait for top champions. Hall's addiction issues, resulting in multiple DUIs and extended absences, made entrusting him with a world championship an enormous risk. Eric Bischoff, despite valuing Hall creatively, couldn't justify putting the company's centerpiece around his waist. The missed storytelling opportunities are heartbreaking to consider. A Hall rebellion against Hogan's leadership could have created compelling television. A championship program with Nash after the Goldberg streak ended might have elevated both men. Instead, Hall remained the extraordinary talent who never quite secured wrestling's ultimate prize. The cruel irony is that among the Clique members and original NWO founders, Hall may have been the most complete performer. His combination of size, technical ability, character work, and audience connection was unmatched. What separated him from championship glory wasn't talent, but the personal demons that haunted him throughout his career. In March 2022, wrestling fans around the world were devastated when Scott Hall passed away at the age of 63. His death came after a series of health complications following hip replacement surgery. Hall had been hospitalized after suffering 3 heart attacks on March 12, 2022. These cardiac events occurred when a blood clot was dislodged during his hip surgery. He was placed on life support at Wellstar Kennestone Hospital in Marietta, Georgia, as his condition deteriorated. On March 14, 2022, his longtime friend and fellow wrestling legend Kevin Nash announced on social media that Hall's family had made the difficult decision to discontinue life support once all his loved ones could gather to say goodbye. Hall passed away later that evening. Wrestling's landscape today would be unrecognizable without Hall's contributions. Would the Attitude Era have happened without the NWO forcing WWE to evolve? Would wrestling have experienced its late 90s boom period? Hall's fingerprints remain on wrestling's DNA. Next up, the British Bulldog. The British Bulldog was one of the most athletic powerhouses in wrestling. He went from being a young prodigy in England to becoming WWE's proud European hero, creating an unforgettable moment when he defeated Bret Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. At a time when bigger meant better, Davey Boy Smith pushed his body to dangerous limits, building his superhuman physique through whatever means necessary. And in 2002, at just 39 years old, the Bulldog's heart would give out from years of abuse. In 1962, David Smith was born in a working-class corner of Lancashire, England. He would transform from a boy watching wrestling on his family's modest television set into one of Britain's most formidable ring warriors, though the path there wasn't what most fans believe. Growing up in Goulburn, Lancashire, where luxury was scarce but dreams were abundant, young David found his escape in the electrifying world of professional wrestling. Huddled around the television with his siblings Terrence, Joanne, and Tracy, he'd watch in awe as larger-than-life characters like Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks battled their opponents. These moments planted the seeds of his future, though none could have predicted just how far they'd grow. At just 15 years old, Smith's passion couldn't be contained any longer. He stepped into the training ring, where something remarkable became immediately apparent. This teenager possessed an almost supernatural aptitude for the sport. His raw talent was so impressive that it caught the attention of producers at ITV's World of Sport, Britain's premier wrestling showcase. In an era when breaking into television, wrestling was about as likely as winning the lottery, Smith had done it before he could even legally drive. A young star was rising in British wrestling, and all eyes were on the prodigy from Lancashire. Smith's natural talent translated into an explosive presence both as a singles competitor and in tag team action. In the singles ranks, his ascent was meteoric, coming within a heartbeat of capturing the prestigious British Welterweight Championship while still a teenager. But it was his partnership with cousin Tom Billington that would change wrestling history. Billington, who carved out his own fearsome reputation as the Dynamite Kid, formed an alliance with Smith that caught the attention of a crucial visitor from across the Atlantic. Bruce Hart, son of legendary promoter Stu Hart, was scouring the UK for fresh talent when he witnessed the raw power and agility of these two British phenoms. The opportunity Hart presented was too tempting to ignore. A chance to wrestle for the renowned Stampede Wrestling promotion in Calgary, Canada. In an era when breaking into North American wrestling was the dream of every European grappler, Smith and Billington had their golden ticket. What they couldn't know was that this move would set them on a path to revolutionize tag team wrestling forever. The infamous Hart Dungeon awaited in Calgary, a proving ground that had forged some of wrestling's greatest talents through pain and perseverance. For Smith and Billington, their British Commonwealth citizenship opened the door to this temple of technical wrestling. But what happened inside would test their limits in ways they never imagined. Under the watchful eye of Stu Hart, a man whose reputation for turning wrestlers into legitimate tough guys was known worldwide, the two Brits endured daily torture sessions that would make ordinary men quit. The dungeon's concrete floor and low ceiling became their classroom, with every submission hold, every stretch, and every grunt of pain molding them into something far beyond their early promise. But it was what happened after their graduation from this brutal finishing school that truly set the stage for greatness. In a twist of fate that would elevate both men's careers, the cousins found themselves on opposite sides of the ring. Their feud captivated Calgary audiences, showcasing their newfound technical prowess and intensity. The program reached its climax when Smith emerged victorious, claiming the prestigious Stampede British Commonwealth Mid-Heavyweight Championship, a title that carried significant weight in the territory's hierarchy. The victory wasn't just about the gold around Smith's waist. It was proof that the dungeon's baptism by fire had transformed these raw talents into polished gems. Every submission learned under Stu's tutelage, every grueling training session, had contributed to creating wrestlers who could not only survive in the demanding world of professional wrestling, but thrive in it. A fateful tour to Japan would add another deadly dimension to Smith's arsenal, the hard-hitting strong style that would later become his signature. But it was the reformation of his partnership with the Dynamite Kid that would change wrestling history. Now calling themselves the British Bulldogs, they terrorized rings across 2 continents, leaving a trail of broken opponents and stolen shows in their wake. Their reputation grew so large it couldn't be contained in Canada or Japan. In 1984, as Vince McMahon was executing his master plan for national expansion, he knew he needed the most explosive talent available. The British Bulldogs were at the top of his list. When McMahon acquired Stampede Wrestling that same year, the Bulldogs signing with WWF wasn't just another contract. It was a statement of intent. Inside the squared circle, they were poetry in motion, a perfect fusion of styles that few teams could match. The Dynamite Kid was a human highlight reel, pioneering a high-flying style that defied gravity and logic in equal measure. Meanwhile, Davey Boy served as the team's powerhouse anchor, his raw strength and surprising agility creating a foundation that allowed his partner to take even greater risks. But while Smith's professional life soared, his personal life was blossoming in equally meaningful ways. Love had found him in the Hart family dynasty, leading to marriage with Diana Hart, Stu's daughter. Their union would produce 2 children, Harry and Georgia, adding new chapters to both the Hart and Smith wrestling legacies. This personal happiness seemed to fuel Smith's in-ring success, creating a period where everything in his life was clicking into place like perfectly executed moves in a championship match. The British Bulldogs weren't just another tag team in WWF's growing roster. They were revolutionaries who would help redefine what tag team wrestling could be, bringing a hybrid style that combined British technical wrestling, Japanese strong style, and North American showmanship in ways audiences had never seen before. Wrestling rings across America were about to witness a revolution in tag team action, starting with a deeply personal rivalry. The British Bulldogs locked horns with their former Stampede stablemates, the Hart Foundation, comprised of Jim the Anvil Neidhart and Smith's brother-in-law, Bret the Hitman Hart. Their matches became instant classics, proving that even on a roster stacked with larger-than-life figures like Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, and Andre the Giant, technical wrestling excellence could steal the spotlight. But it was their feud with Greg the Hammer Valentine and Brutus Beefcake that would write their names in wrestling history. At WrestleMania 2, in a match that showcased the Bulldogs' unique blend of power and innovation, they captured the WWF Tag Team Championships. What followed was a 9-month reign of dominance, where their combination of Dynamite's aerial assault and Davey Boy's raw power proved unbeatable against all challengers. Their championship story would come full circle in January 1987, when the Hart Foundation finally managed to dethrone them in a match that demonstrated just how far all four men had come since their Stampede days. Though no longer champions, the Bulldogs remained a force in the tag division, engaging in memorable programs with teams like the Islanders, the Rougeau brothers, and the imposing Demolition. During this period, the Bulldogs added an unexpected element to their presentation: a real-life English bulldog named Matilda. More than just a mascot, Matilda became an integral part of their character, drawing massive cheers from crowds and adding a unique dimension to their feuds. Some teams would target the beloved canine to get under the Bulldog's skin, leading to heated rivalries that transcended typical wrestling storylines. This era marked a perfect fusion of in-ring excellence and character work, as the Bulldogs proved that technical prowess and crowd connection weren't mutually exclusive. Their matches during this period would influence tag team wrestling for generations to come, setting a standard for what two talented performers could achieve when given the freedom to showcase their abilities. The Dream Team's time in WWF would come to an abrupt end in 1988, driven by escalating tensions between the volatile Dynamite Kid and the Rougeau brothers backstage. Despite Billington's growing reputation as a troublemaker, Smith's loyalty to his cousin led him to follow when they departed, taking their talents to All Japan Pro Wrestling and a resurgent Stampede Wrestling. For 2 years, the Bulldogs continued crafting mat classics across the Pacific, facing off against legendary teams like the Malenkos, the Nasty Boys, and the dynamic Japanese duo of Kenta Kobashi and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi. Each match showcased why they were considered one of wrestling's most innovative partnerships, but beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Billington's personal demons were creating an increasingly toxic situation, poisoning not just their professional relationship, but their family bonds as well. The breaking point finally came when Smith made the difficult decision to forge his own path, securing the British Bulldog trademark for himself, a business move that would drive the final wedge between the cousins. October 1990 marked a pivotal moment in Smith's career as he returned to the WWF, now simply known as the British Bulldog. Gone was the tag team specialist. In his place stood a reimagined powerhouse ready to make his mark as a singles competitor. This transformation wasn't just a change in name or presentation. It was Smith's declaration of independence, stepping out of the shadow of both his cousin and their celebrated tag team legacy. The split would prove prophetic. While Smith was about to enter the most successful phase of his career, Billington's path would take a darker turn, illustrating how two men who once moved in perfect synchronization could end up on such drastically different trajectories. From his first singles match, the British Bulldog unleashed a new intensity in WWF, demolishing opponents like the Warlord, Haku, and even the technically superior Mr. Perfect. His combination of raw power and surprising agility quickly won over crowds, but nowhere was his popularity more explosive than in his native United Kingdom. As WWF's American attendance began to soften, they discovered a goldmine in British wrestling fans who had found their new hero. Capitalizing on this phenomenon, WWF ventured to British soil with groundbreaking shows like UK Rampage and Battle Royal at the Albert Hall. Each appearance by Smith felt like a homecoming, with his victory over the Berserker at Rampage and his triumph in the Albert Hall Battle Royal sending crowds into a frenzy. These successes were just a prelude to what would become one of wrestling's most memorable moments. In 1992, WWF made a historic decision. SummerSlam, Vince McMahon arranged for the British Bulldog to challenge his brother-in-law, Bret the Hitman Hart, for the prestigious Intercontinental Championship. The anticipation was electric. Wembley Stadium swelled with 80,000 passionate fans, the largest legitimate crowd WWF had ever drawn at that point. But this wasn't just about numbers. It was about a perfect storm of circumstances. A hometown hero, a family rivalry, a prestigious title, and the biggest stage British wrestling had ever seen. The match that would follow wouldn't just meet expectations, it would exceed them in ways nobody could have predicted. The tension between these brothers-in-law, both products of the Hart dungeon, had been building for months. Each man knew the other's moves intimately, Hart with his technical precision, Bulldog with his explosive power. As they prepared to step through the curtain at Wembley, both men knew this wasn't just another match. It was a chance to make history. Behind the glittering lights of Wembley Stadium lurked a darker reality. In the days leading up to the biggest match of his career, Smith spiraled into a drug-fueled binge with Jim Neidhart that left him unable to remember the planned sequence of events. The demons that had haunted his former partner Dynamite Kid had found their way to Smith, whose own substance abuse issues were beginning to overshadow his incredible athletic gifts. But sometimes wrestling magic happens in spite of the circumstances. Bret Hart, ever the consummate professional, orchestrated a masterpiece that night. Like a wrestling puppet master, he guided Smith through what would become one of the greatest matches in WWF history. The electricity in Wembley Stadium reached fever pitch as the two brothers-in-law wove a tale of technical brilliance, power moves, and near falls that had 80,000 fans holding their breath with every count. When Smith finally secured the victory and the Intercontinental Championship, it seemed like a coronation, the moment a new superstar was born. The image of him celebrating with his sister Diana and a tearful Bret became an iconic moment in wrestling history. But sometimes the brightest flames burn fastest. Instead of launching Smith to superstardom, his championship reign fizzled. The same issues that had nearly derailed his Wembley performance continued to haunt him. By November, he would drop the title to a rising Shawn Michaels, but worse was to come. In a devastating turn of events, WWF was forced to release Smith after he was caught receiving shipments of human growth hormone in the mail, a scandal that threatened to end his career just as it was reaching new heights. The fall from Wembley's heights to unemployment was a stark reminder of how quickly fortunes could change in professional wrestling, especially when personal demons entered the ring alongside the athletes. Just as Smith hit rock bottom, a turn of events would force him to reinvent himself once again. In the midst of Vince McMahon's highly publicized steroid trial, WWF couldn't risk any further scandals, leaving their former champion to seek opportunities elsewhere. His journey would take him through the indies of Eastern Championship Wrestling and back to the familiar rings of All Japan before landing in World Championship Wrestling in 1993. In WCW, Smith found himself aligned with the franchise player Sting, a partnership that seemed to promise great things. His powerhouse style matched up perfectly against monsters like Sid Vicious and Big Van Vader, with one match against the latter even appearing to crown Smith as the new WCW World Champion. But in classic wrestling politics fashion, a dusty finish, named after Booker Dusty Rhodes' tendency to reverse dramatic victories, saw the title stripped away as quickly as it had been won. Just as his career seemed to be stabilizing, Smith's personal life threw another curveball. A bar fight with someone allegedly making advances toward Diana proved to be the final straw for WCW management. Once again, the British Bulldog found himself without a major platform for his talents. His next stop would be a humbling return to his roots in the UK's All-Star Wrestling, trading holds with local talents like Jimmy Ocean and Drew McDonald, a far cry from the packed stadiums and World Championship matches of just months before. WWF Creative had a unique idea to keep Smith in the spotlight. They paired him with the All-American Lex Luger to form the Allied Powers, a team meant to symbolize the unity between Britain and America. The concept seemed promising on paper, two of wrestling's strongest powerhouses joining forces to dominate the tag team division. This new direction marked yet another reinvention for Smith, showing his adaptability in an ever-changing wrestling landscape. The Allied Powers represented more than just another tag team. It was an attempt to capitalize on both men's popularity in their respective home countries while giving them a fresh direction after their individual main event pursuits had stalled. In what should have been a dominant force, the Allied Powers never quite found their footing in WWF's tag team ranks. Their pay-per-view appearances were limited to a victory over the Blue Brothers at WrestleMania and a failed bid to capture the tag team championships from Owen Hart and Yokozuna at In Your House 2. The partnership crumbled when Luger abruptly departed for WCW, leaving Smith to navigate the waters alone once again. His singles career hit a series of frustrating roadblocks, falling short against Diesel at In Your House 4 and his brother-in-law Bret at In Your House 5. With momentum stalling, Smith made a shocking decision, aligning himself with Jim Cornette's stable alongside Owen Hart. While the group boasted imposing figures like Yokozuna and Vader, it was the partnership between Smith and Owen that truly shined, their natural chemistry and family connection creating tag team magic. Yet Smith's hunger for singles glory never dimmed. May 1996's In Your House. Beware of Dog saw him push Shawn Michaels to the limit in a WWF Championship match that ended in a controversial draw. The inconclusive finish led to a rematch at King of the Ring, the same historic night that gave birth to Austin 3:16. But even on this pivotal evening in wrestling history, Smith's quest for the company's top prize would end in disappointment. These setbacks painted a portrait of a wrestler who could consistently reach the summit but never quite plant his flag at the absolute peak. The British Bulldog's ability to seamlessly transition between singles and tag team excellence showed his versatility, but the ultimate prize remained frustratingly out of reach. Behind the scenes, a reality was settling in. While Vince McMahon viewed Smith as a reliable main event player, he didn't see him as the guy to carry the company's top prize. Rather than let this derail him, Smith channeled his energy into tag team excellence, reuniting with Owen Hart to capture the tag team championships from the Smoking Guns in a memorable victory. The duo proved themselves worthy champions, successfully defending against powerhouse teams like the Legion of Doom and the unlikely pairing of Vader and Mankind. But 1997 would finally see McMahon reward Smith's loyalty and consistency. In February, he and Owen delivered a technical masterpiece in the tournament finals, with Smith emerging as the first ever European champion, a title that seemed tailor-made for the British powerhouse. This triumph would lead to an even bigger opportunity when Bret Hart assembled a new version of the Hart Foundation. Bringing together Bret, Owen, Jim Neidhart, Brian Pillman, and Smith, the stable revolutionized wrestling storytelling through the Canada versus America angle. This unique narrative twist saw the group play heroes in Canada and Europe while serving as villains in the United States. A nuanced approach to wrestling psychology that was years ahead of its time. The reformed Hart Foundation became one of WWF's most compelling acts, with Smith playing a crucial role in their success. This period demonstrated wrestling's ability to blur the lines between good and evil, with audience reaction determined not by traditional face-heel dynamics, but by national pride and loyalty. The Bulldogs' presence added international credibility to the stable, expanding its appeal beyond North American borders and helping create one of the most memorable storylines of the 1990s. As the Hart Foundation's popularity soared in Canada, Smith found himself riding a wave of success, successfully defending his European championship against legitimate tough guys like Ken Shamrock. However, a moment that should have been his crowning achievement turned bitter at the UK-exclusive pay-per-view, One Night Only, on September 20th. In what was meant to be a touching tribute to his cancer-stricken sister Tracy at ringside, Smith was scheduled to retain his title against Shawn Michaels. But wrestling's behind-the-scenes politics would rear its ugly head. Michaels, wielding his considerable backstage influence, had the finish changed so he would emerge victorious instead. The decision left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Here was Smith, in his homeland, dedicating the match to his dying sister, only to have his moment stolen by backstage maneuvering. This incident only intensified the growing real-life animosity between HBK and the Hart family. The tension would reach its breaking point at the now infamous Survivor Series on November 9, 1997. The Montreal Screwjob didn't just change wrestling history, it shattered the Hart Foundation forever. Watching his brother-in-law Bret Hart get deceived in such a public manner, Smith made an immediate decision. Standing in solidarity with his family, he walked out of WWF alongside Bret and Jim Neidhart, making the jump to WCW. This exodus marked the end of an era. The Hart Foundation, one of wrestling's most compelling stables, was torn apart not by storyline betrayal, but by real-world business decisions. Smith's departure showed that sometimes blood and loyalty run thicker than business, even in the cutthroat world of professional wrestling. In 1998, Smith's once impressive physique had become a liability, his steroid use leaving him bloated and limited in the ring. His WCW run reflected this decline, relegated to undercard matches with Neidhart until a devastating accident in September changed everything. During a match, Smith took a brutal bump onto a concealed trapdoor, meant for Ultimate Warrior's dramatic entrance, that nobody had warned him about. The impact was catastrophic. What followed was a nightmare scenario that exposed wrestling's darker side. While Smith lay injured, Eric Bischoff fired him, believing he was exaggerating his condition. The reality was far more serious. Smith developed a spinal infection during recovery that nearly left him paralyzed. The physical pain drove him deeper into drug dependency, creating a vicious cycle that would follow him back to WWF in 1999. His return to WWF saw a stripped-down version of the British Bulldog. Gone were the iconic Union Jack tights, replaced by plain jeans. Even his signature Rule Britannia theme music was taken away. This repackaging, combined with his physical limitations and ongoing substance issues, left Smith a shadow of his former self. In an era defined by larger-than-life attitude-era personalities, he found himself losing to stars like The Rock before being demoted to the now devalued European Championship division. The transformation was jarring for longtime fans. The same wrestler who had once electrified Wembley Stadium was now struggling to keep up with the faster-paced style of the late 90s. His body, battered by years of abuse both in and out of the ring, simply couldn't deliver the power moves that had once made him special. This period served as a stark reminder of wrestling's physical toll and the dangerous spiral that could occur when injuries and addiction intersected. After years of setbacks, Smith managed one final moment of glory, capturing his old European Championship from D'Lo Brown on SmackDown in October 1999. But this victory was merely a brief flicker of his former brilliance. He drifted into the chaotic hardcore division, his once precise power moves replaced by brawling and weapon shots, until WWF was forced to release him in May 2000 after he arrived at an event clearly unfit to perform. As his professional life crumbled, his personal world shattered alongside it. His marriage to Diana Hart disintegrated amid shocking rumors of infidelity involving top WWF stars Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin. The divorce in 2000 marked the end of his connection to the legendary Hart family that had given him both his greatest triumphs and deepest sorrows. Hitting rock bottom forced Smith to confront his demons. He checked into an Atlanta rehabilitation clinic to battle his dependency on prescription painkillers, an addiction that had spiraled out of control following his 1998 back injury. A disturbing arrest for allegedly threatening Diana and her sister Ellie served as his wake-up call. With remarkable determination, Smith committed to getting clean, purging all medications from his system. Just as it seemed Smith had conquered his personal battles and was preparing for one last WWE run, tragedy struck. On May 18, 2002, while vacationing in British Columbia with his girlfriend, the British Bulldog suffered a fatal heart attack at just 39 years old. Though he had achieved sobriety, years of substance abuse had taken their toll. In 2020, WWE finally recognized his contributions with a Hall of Fame induction. In a touching moment that bridged generations, his son Harry brought Buffy, granddaughter of Smith's beloved mascot Matilda, to the ceremony. Next up, Sid Vicious. Sid Vicious was one of wrestling's most intimidating giants, whose unhinged character and explosive power moves made him a two-time champion in both WWE and WCW. However, in 1993, a brutal hotel room fight left Arn Anderson stabbed with scissors and Sid himself bleeding from multiple wounds, forever altering his career trajectory. This shocking, violent incident is just one piece of the puzzle in understanding Sid Vicious, the legend who WWE has mysteriously blackballed from the Hall of Fame. In 1960, Sidney Raymond Vicious entered the world in rural Arkansas. Those early years shaped not just the man, but the monster who would later dominate wrestling rings across America. Growing up on an Arkansas farm forged Sid through physical labor. Day after day, farm life sculpted his frame naturally. He hauled, lifted, and worked from sunrise to sunset, building what would become one of wrestling's most impressive physiques through practical work rather than through gyms or trainers. By adulthood, Sid towered at 6 feet 9, the kind of height that commands attention wherever you go. But what makes Sid's story truly fascinating is how dramatically different his path was from most wrestling superstars of his era. While future legends like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart grew up idolizing wrestlers and dreaming of the ring, Sid had absolutely no interest in professional wrestling. None. Zero. For most of his early adult life, becoming a wrestler never crossed his mind. He didn't collect wrestling figures, didn't watch matches on TV, didn't practice moves with his friends. Wrestling simply wasn't on his radar. This complete indifference makes the story of his wrestling discovery all the more remarkable. According to Sid himself, he was just working out at a local gym when fate stepped in, wearing neon fringe and sunglasses. The legendary Macho Man Randy Savage spotted him across the weight room, approached this imposing figure, and asked point-blank if he'd ever considered wrestling professionally. But wrestling stories often come with contradictions, and this origin tale is no exception. Lanny Poffo, Randy Savage's brother, remembers a completely different scenario. In Poffo's version, Sid actively sought out his opportunity, approaching Poffo at a Memphis wrestling show and directly asking how to break into the business. Two entirely different accounts of the same pivotal moment. Was Sid discovered while minding his own business, or did he deliberately seek his opportunity? We may never know the truth, but what's clear is that Sid's entry into wrestling wasn't driven by passion or childhood dreams. His motivation was purely practical. When his wife became pregnant, Sid needed steady income, and he needed it quickly. As he bluntly put it, "My wife got pregnant, and it sounded like I could get into that making more a little bit faster. No romantic notions about artistic expression. Just a tall guy with bills to pay and a baby on the way." This pragmatic approach distinguished Sid from the beginning. While many wrestlers speak of sacrificing everything for their love of the business, Sid viewed wrestling exactly as it was: a job. A way to provide for his family that happened to pay better than his alternatives. That doesn't mean he didn't work hard. Early footage shows a raw but captivating presence. During one of his first televised matches in Continental Championship Wrestling, Sid manhandled his opponent with such convincing power that fans at ringside visibly recoiled. Even as a rookie, he moved with an athleticism that belied his massive frame. Opponents looked genuinely intimidated, and for good reason. His natural gifts allowed rapid progression despite his late start. While other newcomers struggled for years in obscurity, promoters immediately recognized Sid's potential. That imposing presence and natural athleticism couldn't be taught, and you can almost see the wheels turning in promoters' minds as they watched his early matches. His quick rise created resentment among wrestlers who had paid their dues through years of low-paying matches. But Sid wasn't concerned with the traditional path or pleasing the locker room. He focused on maximizing his earning potential in the shortest time possible. This business-first mentality defined Sid's entire career. While others became entangled in creative politics, Sid consistently made decisions based on one factor: which option would put the most money in his pocket. In an industry notorious for exploiting performers, Sid's approach was refreshingly self-protective. He understood his value in a business where size and presence were premium commodities. If a promotion wasn't offering what he felt he was worth, he walked away, displaying rare leverage in a business where most wrestlers feared unemployment above all. The irony? Sid's lack of childhood wrestling fandom became his greatest asset. Without rose-colored glasses, he saw the business clearly for what it was: a business. He wasn't blinded by glory or trapped by dreams of legacy. He was there to get paid, and this clarity guided every career decision. This mindset helped him navigate the cutthroat wrestling world effectively. While many peers ended up broken, Sid's pragmatism protected both his finances and physical well-being. He knew when to push for more and when to walk away. His rapid ascent is remarkable considering his complete lack of passion for wrestling. While technical wizards like Bret Hart spent decades perfecting their craft, Sid reached comparable success with raw presence and business savvy alone. In less than 2 years from his debut, he commanded a major promotion salary most veterans only dreamed of. Throughout his career, this practical approach led to both his greatest successes and most controversial moments. Sid never pretended to be what he wasn't, a wrestling purist or a company man. He was a businessman in a business often pretending to be something else. For a man with no wrestling passion, Sid's first character required him to become completely unrecognizable. Continental Championship Wrestling didn't introduce the world to Sid Udy. They unleashed Lord Humongous, a hockey-masked monster straight from apocalyptic cinema. This inspired choice to hide their physically impressive new talent behind a mask was wrestling genius at its most practical. When Sid stepped into the ring as Lord Humongous in 1987, few realized they were witnessing the birth of a future world champion. The character, shamelessly stolen from the film Mad Max 2. The Road Warrior featured Sid in a hockey mask, studded leather outfit, and carrying a chain. This mask became a veil that concealed both his identity and his vulnerabilities, allowing his imposing physicality to speak where his experience couldn't. The brilliance of the Lord Humongous gimmick was twofold. First, it completely concealed Sid's identity, allowing him to make rookie mistakes without damaging his future marketability. Second, it capitalized on his intimidating physical attributes while minimizing the need for technical wrestling proficiency. Fans didn't expect a complex wrestling match from a post-apocalyptic madman. They wanted destruction. Behind that mask, something remarkable was happening. Despite his raw inexperience, Sid was already displaying the physical presence that would define his career. His movements were limited but impactful. His offense was basic but believable. Most importantly, even beneath layers of costume, you couldn't hide that imposing 6'9" frame that moved with surprising athleticism for someone so large. The Lord Humongous character worked because it emphasized Sid's natural strengths. The mask and minimal speaking requirements focused audience attention entirely on his intimidating presence. He wasn't expected to deliver technical masterpieces. He was there to dominate. This formula of presence over technique would become the blueprint for his entire career. Continental Championship Wrestling operated primarily in Alabama and the surrounding Southern Territories, far from the national spotlight of WWF or even the regional power of Jim Crockett Promotions. This smaller territory provided the ideal environment for Sid to develop his skills away from mainstream scrutiny. Here, he could work matches against experienced veterans who could guide him through the fundamentals while teaching him how to maximize his obvious physical gifts. Sid's development took an unexpected international turn when he toured with New Japan Pro Wrestling as Vicious Warrior. This overseas excursion transformed his trajectory, as New Japan specifically groomed him to be the next Bruiser Brody, one of the most feared and respected gaijin, foreign wrestlers in Japanese history. The Bruiser Brody comparison was no accident. Brody had built his legendary status through his wild, brawling style and intimidating presence rather than technical wrestling excellence. This blueprint provided the perfect developmental path for Sid, reinforcing that his imposing size and menacing demeanor could be more valuable than complex wrestling maneuvers. These international tours forged crucial dimensions in Sid's arsenal. Japanese wrestling's stiffer style hardened his strikes, adding credibility to his offense. The grueling tour schedule built his conditioning and durability. Most significantly, exposure to Japanese psychology taught him how to maximize impact with minimal movement. A lesson that would pay dividends throughout his career as he moved between American promotions with different stylistic expectations. Back in America, Sid evolved into Sid Vicious in world-class championship wrestling, borrowing from the infamous Sex Pistols bassist. This name change marked his emergence from behind the mask, developing a character with an edge of unpredictability and danger that matched his intimidating look. The Sid Vicious identity accomplished something crucial. It provided a persona that could travel between promotions and territories. Unlike Lord Humongous, which was tied to a specific visual presentation, Sid Vicious could evolve and adapt. This flexibility would prove valuable as Sid navigated between major promotions throughout his career. These early character iterations established the template that would carry Sid to multiple world championships. From Lord Humongous to Vicious Warrior to Sid Vicious, each character emphasized intimidation and power. His formative experiences across different territories and countries taught Sid exactly where his value lay in the wrestling industry. These smaller territories served as the perfect incubator for Sid's developing persona. Unlike today's wrestlers who often debut on national television with minimal experience, Sid benefited from this more traditional path. Continental Championship Wrestling and his international tours kept him hidden from mainstream audiences while he learned his craft, preventing fans from witnessing his inevitable rookie mistakes. This strategic development was far from accidental. Wrestling promoters have long understood that giants require special handling. For every Undertaker who succeeds on the biggest stage, countless other big men fail because they're exposed too early. By keeping Sid in smaller territories and behind masks, promoters protected their investment while giving him time to develop the fundamentals. The wrestling business has always excelled at maximizing assets. In Sid, they had a physical specimen with natural charisma and intimidating presence, but limited technical ability and experience. The solution? Create characters that emphasized his strengths and masked his weaknesses. Lord Humongous couldn't execute a perfect armbar, but he didn't need to. He just needed to look terrifying and hit hard. By the time Sid was ready for national exposure, he had internalized the most important lesson for someone of his size. Wrestling didn't need to be complex to be effective. His early characters had taught him that presence, intensity, and a few devastating power moves could carry him further than technical excellence ever would. This formula would propel him to championship glory across his career. National exposure was calling, and in 1989, Sid answered by joining WCW as one half of the Skyscrapers, a tag team so physically imposing that promoters practically salivated at their potential. Standing nearly 7 feet tall alongside Dan Spivey, the duo created an instant visual impact that few tag teams in wrestling history could match. When these twin towers entered the ring, announcers would frantically emphasize their combined height of almost 14 feet, making them look like giants compared to most of their opponents. The Skyscrapers demolished jobbers with ruthless efficiency, showcasing their raw power and intimidation factor. Television audiences quickly took notice of these behemoths, who tossed grown men around the ring like rag dolls. With their matching black tights and boots, they presented a unified front of destruction that positioned them for a major push up the card. When Vince McMahon needed a physically imposing hero to stand alongside Hulk Hogan in the summer of 1991, he turned to the most unlikely candidate imaginable, a 6'9" monster who looked like he'd sooner eat children than protect them. The WWF wasted no time transforming Sid Udy into Sid Justice, with the name itself promising fairness while his towering frame promised anything but. This jarring character pivot would kick off one of wrestling's strangest career chapters, setting Sid on a trajectory that would lead from referee to WrestleMania main eventer to softball enthusiast. Sid made his WWF debut in spectacular fashion, serving as the special referee at SummerSlam 1991. Standing between Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior as they faced off against the Triangle of Terror, Sergeant Slaughter, Colonel Mustafa, and General Adnan, Sid instantly established himself as a physically dominant force aligned with the promotion's top heroes. The crowd responded positively, but something felt off about this arrangement from day one. Everything about Sid screamed villain. His imposing size, intimidating gaze, and barely contained aggression contradicted his role as a smiling, rule-enforcing good guy. The WWF might as well have tried turning Freddy Krueger into a kindergarten teacher. Wrestling audiences can suspend their disbelief for many things: undead morticians, snake handlers, and garbage men turned wrestlers. But a menacing giant playing against type-stretched credibility to its breaking point. The 1992 Royal Rumble provided the perfect opportunity to course-correct. During the climactic moments, Sid eliminated the beloved Hulk Hogan, leading to a memorable confrontation that set up his long-overdue heel turn. The crowd's reaction told the story. This was the role Sid was born to play. The elimination felt natural because audiences already sensed the villain lurking beneath the hero's veneer. This heel turn led directly to one of the most controversial booking decisions of the early 1990s. The original plan for WrestleMania 8 had been a dream match between Hulk Hogan and the newly arrived Ric Flair, a confrontation fans had anticipated for years. Instead, the WWF pivoted to Hogan versus Sid Justice in the main event, a decision that left many fans disappointed before the match even happened. While Sid was physically impressive and generated solid heat as a villain, he simply wasn't Ric Flair. Wrestling fans who had waited years for the Hogan-Flair showdown on the grandest stage felt shortchanged. Through no fault of his own, Sid was positioned as the disappointing alternative to the match everyone actually wanted to see. When WrestleMania 8 finally arrived on April 5, 1992, at the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis, the Hogan-Sid main event was already fighting an uphill battle. Would the match deliver enough action to overcome the pre-show disappointment? Could Sid cement himself as a worthy WrestleMania headliner? The match itself was serviceable if unspectacular. Exactly what you'd expect from a Hulk Hogan match of the era, with plenty of power moves but limited technical wrestling. But what about the finish? After Hogan hit his signature leg drop finisher, Sid kicked out at the last possible moment, 2.9 seconds into the count. The problem? The referee counted to 3 anyway, creating a botched finish that left everyone confused. Fans in the arena could clearly see Sid's shoulder up before the 3 count, but the match was called in Hogan's favor regardless. The botched finish created an awkward moment that perfectly encapsulated Sid's run in the company, something that should have worked on paper but somehow went sideways in execution. Behind the scenes, the situation was even messier. Around WrestleMania time, Sid had failed a drug test under the company's substance abuse policy, adding another complication to his already troubled run. In a decision that revealed much about the WWF's selective enforcement of its own policies, the company allowed Sid to work both WrestleMania and the subsequent European tour before serving his suspension. This arrangement highlights how differently the rules were applied to main event talent versus mid-card performers, especially during this era. What happened next would establish Sid's reputation for making unexpected career decisions. Rather than serve his suspension and return to what was still a prominent position in the company, Sid quit the WWF altogether. His reason? Softball. In one of wrestling's most unusual career priorities, Sid chose returning to his recreational softball league over continuing his main event run in the world's largest wrestling promotion. This decision seems incomprehensible to most wrestling fans who couldn't imagine anyone walking away from a WrestleMania main event position to play amateur sports. But for Sid, who had always viewed wrestling primarily as a money-making venture rather than a passion, the decision made perfect sense. The softball decision perfectly illustrated the fundamental difference between Sid and most of his colleagues. While other wrestlers would sacrifice everything for a main event spot, Sid repeatedly demonstrated that wrestling was simply a job to him, one he was willing to walk away from when it no longer suited his lifestyle or priorities. What makes this career detour even more remarkable is that Sid was scheduled to enter a significant program with the Ultimate Warrior upon his return from suspension. This wasn't a case of a wrestler being pushed down the card. Sid was walking away from a guaranteed high-profile position that most wrestlers would have killed for. In interviews years later, Sid would attribute his departure to multiple factors beyond just softball. He expressed frustration with the direction of his character and acknowledged that the failed drug test had complicated his standing in the company. But regardless of the full reasoning, the abrupt nature of his exit became yet another chapter in his increasingly unpredictable career narrative. While softball might seem like the strangest chapter in Sid's career, it pales in comparison to what happened in a Blackburn, England hotel room in 1993. 24 stab wounds, 2 bleeding wrestlers, and a championship opportunity that would vanish in a pool of blood. The infamous scissors incident became the night Sid Udy nearly became a murderer. After his abrupt WWF departure, Sid found himself back in WCW in 1993. This time, he arrived with a new presentation as the mystery client of flamboyant manager Colonel Robert Parker. The promotion quickly paired him with the monstrous Vader to form one of wrestling's most physically intimidating tag teams, the aptly named Masters of the Powerbomb. With two of wrestling's most imposing figures destroying opponents with devastating powerbombs, WCW seemed to have a winning formula on their hands. Behind the scenes, the company had even bigger plans for Sid. Television tapings had already recorded promotional footage showing Sid as the World Heavyweight Champion, strongly indicating that WCW was positioning him to defeat Vader for the title at their biggest event of the year, Starrcade 1993. After years of starting and stopping pushes across multiple companies, Sid was finally on the verge of a sustained run at the very top of a major promotion. But everything would unravel during a seemingly routine European tour in October 1993. The evening started innocently enough at the hotel bar where the wrestlers were staying. Too Cold Scorpio, who witnessed the events, later recounted how Sid and respected veteran Arn Anderson began discussing WCW's direction. Sid was saying how the company needed to push the big guys more, Scorpio recalled. Arn was defending the old-school workers who could actually wrestle. As the night wore on and alcohol flowed, the conversation grew increasingly heated. What started as professional disagreement turned personal. "You're just jealous they're grooming me for the title," Sid reportedly sneered. "You'll never be half the worker some of us are," Anderson fired back. When other wrestlers couldn't defuse the tension, both men eventually returned to their separate hotel rooms. The argument should have ended there. It didn't. According to multiple accounts, Sid later approached Anderson's room, pounding on the door. "We're not done talking," he shouted through the door. When Anderson opened it, the verbal confrontation quickly escalated. "I heard shouting, then crashes, then screaming," one wrestler who requested anonymity told reporters later. "By the time we got there, there was blood everywhere." Hotel room scissors, the kind typically found alongside the stationary and complementary pens, became weapons in one of wrestling's most notorious real-life fights. In the chaotic struggle that followed, Anderson suffered approximately 20 stab wounds, while Sid himself was stabbed 4 times. The hotel hallway became a bloody crime scene as other wrestlers and road agents rushed to separate the men. Medical personnel were called immediately, and both required hospital treatment. According to those present, if the fight hadn't been broken up when it was, the outcome could have been fatal. WCW executives faced an immediate crisis. The company was in the middle of an international tour with 2 top stars now hospitalized. Their initial response was attempting to keep the incident quiet, difficult in wrestling's gossip-heavy culture. Word spread quickly through the locker room. According to wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer's reporting, many wrestlers threatened to walk out if Sid wasn't immediately fired. The scissors incident had crossed a line that even the often lawless wrestling business couldn't ignore. Neither Sid nor Anderson wanted to remain in England for the 90-day period required for a full criminal investigation. With both parties unwilling to press charges and eager to return to the United States for medical treatment, no criminal prosecution took place. The incident remained strictly a matter for WCW's internal discipline. The company made their decision. Sid was released from his contract. His planned championship victory at Starrcade 1993 was scrapped, along with all promotional materials showing him as champion. In a business where difficult backstage behavior was often tolerated if you drew money, Sid had finally gone too far. For Anderson, though seriously injured, the path forward was clearer. As a respected veteran with close ties to many influential figures in the company, he would eventually return to his role in WCW after recovering. His reputation as a level-headed professional likely led many to assume Sid was the primary aggressor. What makes the scissors incident so significant in wrestling lore is how it represents a genuine career derailment. Wrestling history is filled with backstage fights that became part of a performer's mythology without significantly altering their career trajectory. But for Sid, this was different. In a single night, he went from being positioned as the next world champion to unemployable by a major promotion. The timing couldn't have been worse. WCW was entering a period of creative renaissance under Eric Bischoff's leadership, and the World Championship opportunity would have positioned Sid at the center of this new era. Instead, he spent the next 2 years working in smaller promotions like the USWA, rebuilding his reputation and waiting for the major companies to call again. Perhaps most tragically, the scissors incident cemented a perception of Sid that had been building throughout his career. That for all his physical gifts and charisma, he was ultimately too unpredictable and volatile to be trusted with a company's top position. While his imposing size and look had repeatedly earned him second and third chances despite earlier controversies, the extreme nature of the scissors incident tested the limits of wrestling's notorious forgiveness for marketable talent. 2 years after the bloody scissors incident, the wrestling world witnessed something that defied all conventional career logic. Sid Vicious, the man who had been fired for one of the most violent backstage altercations in history, was suddenly back on WWF television in 1995 as Psycho Sid. Even more surprising? He wasn't languishing in the undercard. He was immediately positioned as the imposing bodyguard for then WWF Champion Shawn Michaels, one of the company's biggest stars. The wrestling business has always operated under its own strange moral code, but Sid's return exposed its most fundamental truth. Box office appeal trumps everything, even personal animosity. According to former WWF writer Bruce Pritchard, Vince personally couldn't stand Sid, but he knew money when he saw it. World Wrestling Federation was hemorrhaging top talent to rival World Championship Wrestling, which had deeper pockets thanks to Ted Turner's backing. With stars like Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and others jumping ship, McMahon needed established names who could connect with audiences immediately. The Psycho prefix added to Sid's name was a deliberate acknowledgement of his reputation. WWF leaned into his volatile history, presenting him as an unpredictable force of nature. His entrance music began with a haunting scream, setting the perfect tone for a character perpetually on the edge of violence. McMahon reportedly told Sid directly, "We're selling what people already believe about you." Initially, the partnership between Michaels and Sid worked smoothly. The visual contrast was striking. The 6'9" powerhouse standing guard over the comparatively smaller showstopper. During their matches against tag teams like Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith, Sid's devastating powerbombs would bring crowds to their feet. But wrestling storylines demand betrayal, and the inevitable turn came when Sid attacked Michaels after a frustrating tag match loss, establishing himself as one of the company's premier villains overnight. This heel turn led to a main event program against WWF Champion Diesel, Kevin Nash, in early 1995. Their in-your-house showdown showcased Sid's strengths, his intimidating presence and powerful offense, while protecting him from lengthy matches that might expose his limitations. Yet despite the strong initial push, the program with Diesel fizzled. Within months, Sid found himself drifting down the card, working with mid-level talent instead of main eventers. By early 1996, Sid was once again gone from WWF television. Unlike his previous departures, this exit wasn't marked by controversy or softball leagues. It was simply a matter of creative direction running dry. With little for him to do, Sid did something almost unthinkable for someone who had main-evented WrestleMania just a few years earlier. He retired from wrestling and returned to regular blue-collar work. For a brief period, it seemed Sid had genuinely moved on from the wrestling business. He found stable employment away from the spotlight, the chaotic travel schedule, and the politics of the locker room. But wrestling retirements rarely stick, especially when opportunity comes knocking. That opportunity emerged from an unexpected source: the Ultimate Warrior's abrupt second departure from the WWF. Warrior, who had returned at WrestleMania 12 in 1996, quickly found himself at odds with management again and left the company by June. This sudden exit created a massive hole in WWF's roster during a time when WCW was dominating the Monday Night Ratings war. McMahon, ever the pragmatist, reached out to Sid once more. The offer was too good to refuse: a significant push, prominent television time, and a salary that reflected his drawing power. By July 1996, Sid was back on WWF programming, loudly proclaiming himself the master and ruler of the world, while powerbombing opponents through tables. This third chance with the company represented something unprecedented in Sid's career: a genuine opportunity for sustained success at the highest level. Having returned with newfound focus and determination, Sid connected with audiences in ways he hadn't before. His simple yet effective power moves and intense, sometimes unhinged promos made him a compelling character during the transitional period between WWF's family-friendly New Generation Era and the edgier Attitude Era that was beginning to take shape. The culmination of this unlikely comeback came at Survivor Series 1996, when Sid defeated Shawn Michaels to capture the WWF Championship, his first world title in a major promotion. The Madison Square Garden crowd erupted as Sid planted Michaels with a powerbomb and secured the 3 count. Their match featured a dramatic moment when Sid countered Michaels' aerial attack with raw power, symbolizing how brute strength could overcome technical skill. After nearly a decade in the business, multiple controversial exits, and the infamous scissors incident that should have blacklisted him forever, Sid Vicious had finally reached wrestling's pinnacle. This championship victory represented the wrestling industry's contradictory value system in its purest form. A man who had burned bridges in spectacular fashion, who openly admitted he saw wrestling merely as a paycheck rather than a passion, who had literally stabbed a respected locker room leader, was now the face of the world's largest wrestling company. The message couldn't have been clearer. In professional wrestling, marketability outweighs all other considerations, even morality. Sid's triumph also exposed an uncomfortable reality about wrestling's power structure. While wrestlers themselves face strict codes of loyalty and are expected to pay dues, promoters operate under no such restrictions. They'll welcome back almost anyone, regardless of past transgressions, if they believe that person can sell tickets or boost ratings. The same McMahon, who reportedly disliked Sid personally, had no qualms about placing the company's most prestigious title around his waist when business demanded it. The championship reign legitimized Sid in ways his impressive physique and intimidating presence alone never could. He was now officially recognized as a performer who could carry a company even if just temporarily. For a man who entered the business relatively late and approached it pragmatically, this validation must have been particularly satisfying. Holding that prestigious WWF Championship should have cemented Sid as an all-time great. But here's the strangest part. A man with 4 world titles across 2 major promotions barely registers in conversations about wrestling legends. How could someone with championship credentials matching Hogan and Flair somehow fade into wrestling's second tier? The answer reveals wrestling's harsh truth. Timing is everything. When Sid claimed the WWF Championship at Survivor Series 1996, he embraced a new character evolution. The master and ruler of the world persona capitalized on his intimidating presence, giving fans a dominant champion whose physical stature made his title reign believable. Standing in the ring with his arms raised, championship gold wrapped around his waist, Sid finally had the validation that had eluded him for years. Fans initially responded with genuine enthusiasm, chanting his name as he posed with his newly won gold. But a strange phenomenon was occurring in arenas across America. Despite Sid standing tall as the company's champion, the crowd's attention was increasingly drawn to a brewing feud between Bret the Hitman Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Their collision at WrestleMania 13 would become one of wrestling's most influential matches, setting the stage for the Attitude Era that would revolutionize the business. Sid, despite being champion, found himself caught in the undertow of wrestling's changing tides. This unfortunate timing haunted his entire championship career. While Sid was establishing himself as a credible main event champion, the wrestling landscape shifted beneath his feet. Audiences evolved too, moving beyond their fascination with larger-than-life monsters who dominated opponents. Wrestling fans now demanded complexity, shades of gray, and character depth that Sid's straightforward power persona wasn't built to provide. Early 1997 brought the infamously known Lost Smile incident. Shawn Michaels appeared on Raw to announce he was vacating the WWF Championship he'd won from Sid, claiming a career-threatening knee injury. The circumstances surrounding this decision have been debated for decades. Was Michaels legitimately injured, or unwilling to lose the title to Undertaker at WrestleMania? This unexpected development created a power vacuum leading directly to Sid's second WWF Championship reign in February 1997, when he defeated Bret Hart to reclaim the title. On paper, this solidified his legacy. A two-time WWF champion who'd beaten both Michaels and Hart, two of the most respected technical wrestlers in history. Yet, as Sid celebrated his second coronation, veteran fans could sense the company's creative direction shifting away from his style of performer. This second reign lasted just over a month before culminating at WrestleMania 13 against The Undertaker. The match itself was solid, with Sid's power contrasting against Undertaker's methodical style. But again, Sid's moment was overshadowed. The same event featured the iconic Hart vs. Austin submission match that stole the show and redirected the company's creative trajectory. Sid became the streak's sixth victim, yet few remember this compared to the blood-soaked image of Steve Austin screaming in the sharpshooter. After departing WWF, Sid disappeared from major wrestling promotions for nearly 2 years. His 1999 return came with a repackaged identity as WCW's Millennium Man. This character attempted to capitalize on Y2K anxieties while borrowing from Bill Goldberg's undefeated streak formula. While fans initially popped for his return, the excitement quickly faded as WCW's creative confusion became apparent. WCW in 1999 showed serious signs of decline, with frequent booking changes and a roster bloated with aging stars. Sid's Millennium Man, while initially receiving a solid push, became another casualty of the company's chaotic direction. His attempts to build Goldberg-like momentum felt derivative rather than innovative, especially with Goldberg still competing in the same company. Despite these challenges, Sid captured the WCW World Heavyweight Championship twice in 2000. These achievements should have represented his career's culmination, validation across multiple companies and eras. Instead, they became footnotes in wrestling history, remembered more for occurring during WCW's death spiral than for memorable storylines or matches. Even as the championship was placed around his waist, television viewership continued to decline precipitously. While championship timing may have hindered Sid's legacy, nothing would define his wrestling career more permanently than 8 seconds of footage that wrestling broadcasts still refuse to show in its entirety. How could one attempted move transform a 6'9" powerhouse into a cautionary tale that makes even hardened wrestling veterans wince 20 years later? January 14, 2001. WCW's Sin pay-per-view event in Indianapolis. The once mighty wrestling promotion was already on life support, hemorrhaging viewers and money at an alarming rate. But nobody in the Conseco Fieldhouse that night was thinking about corporate balance sheets when Sid Vicious climbed the turnbuckle during a 4-way match for the World Heavyweight Championship. What happened next remains one of pro wrestling's most horrific moments captured on live. Several wrestlers had reportedly advised him against trying aerial maneuvers given his size and weight. At over 300 pounds and approaching his 40s, Sid was neither built nor trained for high-flying tactics. But in the competitive world of wrestling, where performers constantly push boundaries to stand out, caution often takes a backseat to spectacle. The moment unfolded with terrible inevitability. Sid leaped forward to deliver the boot, his massive frame coming down at an awkward angle. The human leg has structural limits, even one belonging to a physical spin like a thunderclap of doom, silencing the crowd instantly. His tibia and fibula snapped, bones protruding through his wrestling boot in a catastrophic compound fracture. The camera caught the horrific moment before WCW production hastily cut away, but the damage was done, both to Sid and to everyone watching. The commentators fell silent, their usual hyperbole abandoned. When they found their voices again, the bombast was gone, replaced with genuine horror and concern. This wasn't scripted drama. This was real human suffering playing out on pay-per-view. Fans who seconds earlier had been cheering wildly now recoiled in shock. Some turned away, others became physically ill. The atmosphere transformed from entertainment to emergency as medical personnel rushed to the ring. The image of Sid's broken leg became permanently seared into the memory of everyone present, a stark reminder of the physical reality behind the theatrical combat. Wrestling injuries are common, but rarely with such visible devastation. This wasn't a hidden injury that could be masked with tape and determination. This was trauma that shattered the illusion of invincibility surrounding these larger-than-life performers and exposed the fragile humanity beneath the carefully constructed personas. For Sid, the physical agony was just the beginning of his ordeal. Rehabilitation required multiple surgeries and the insertion of a metal rod to stabilize his shattered bones. Recovery from such a catastrophic break would stretch not across weeks or months but years, a devastating prospect for a performer already in the later stages of his career. WCW's response to the injury revealed much about its deteriorating state. In better days, the company might have properly supported an injured star of Sid's caliber throughout recovery. Instead, the promotion, already financially struggling and just months from being purchased by WWE, provided inadequate support during his rehabilitation. The lack of organizational backing becomes more troubling, considering the severity of the injury. A compound fracture required extensive medical intervention, physical therapy, and forced Sid away from any income-generating activities. For a wrestler whose approach to the business was always built on practical financial decisions rather than artistic passion, this organizational abandonment confirmed the industry's view of performers as disposable assets. The timing couldn't have been worse professionally. WCW would be purchased by WWE in March 2001, just 2 months after Sid's injury. Any opportunity for him to leverage his position during the acquisition or transition to WWE programming vanished with his medical condition. While other WCW stars negotiated new contracts or positioned themselves for career advancement, Sid focused simply on learning to walk again. What makes the injury especially poignant is understanding that Sid had always approached wrestling with clear-eyed practicality. Wrestling was employment, not passion. Sid's return to the ring after his catastrophic leg injury defies medical logic. Most athletes would have hung up their boots permanently after such trauma, but between 2004 and 2017, the imposing figure made several surprising comebacks. Perhaps most memorable was his 2012 appearance on WWE Raw, where, at 52 years old, he defeated Heath Slater with his trademark powerbomb. The crowd's thunderous reaction proved his character still resonated with fans, even as a nostalgia act. That reaction highlights wrestling's most puzzling contradiction. How can a man who headlined against Hulk Hogan and The Undertaker, who held world championships in both major companies, remain conspicuously absent from the WWE Hall of Fame, while wrestlers with far less impressive resumes receive their rings? The numbers speak volumes. 4 world championships across WWF and WCW. Multiple WrestleMania main events. A career spanning the industry's most profitable and culturally relevant eras. By any measurable standard, Sid's accomplishments warrant wrestling's highest honor. Yet year after year, when WWE announces its Hall of Fame class, his name remains noticeably absent. WWE's Hall of Fame stands as a sanctum of loyalty that Sid's pragmatic approach never penetrated. The company, as keeper of wrestling's official history, rewards those who demonstrated unwavering dedication. Sid's pattern of abrupt departures, leaving WWF for softball, exiting WCW after the Scissors incident, and his various contract disputes, contradicts the company's preferred narrative of wrestlers who loved the business above all else. Vince McMahon reportedly never personally warmed to Sid, viewing him as a necessary talent during roster shortages rather than a cornerstone performer. In wrestling, personal relationships often supersede professional accomplishments, with being in the boss's good graces mattering as much as championship victories. The infamous Scissors incident with Arn Anderson remains a black mark as well. While WWE has forgiven worse behaviors from other Hall inductees, the company selectively sanitizes which controversial moments it incorporates into its version of wrestling history. This real-world violence represents the kind of brutality WWE distances itself from in the PG era. Sid's transparent admission that wrestling was simply a job creates another barrier. In an industry built on the mythology of wrestlers paying dues and sacrificing everything, his financial prioritization makes him an uncomfortable anomaly. The Hall celebration typically frames inductees as lifelong dreamers who achieve their ultimate goal, not pragmatists who viewed wrestling as their most profitable career option. His promo style presents another complication. While genuinely intimidating at his best, his unintentional comedic moments have become immortalized through YouTube compilations and memes. WWE prefers to induct legends whose legacies they can control, rather than those colored by viral bloopers like his infamous, "I have half the brain that you do" flub. What makes this exclusion particularly striking is how it contrasts with similar performers who received the honor. The Ultimate Warrior, another physically impressive but technically limited performer with a history of walking out, was eventually inducted. Diesel, Kevin Nash, whose WWF Championship reign coincided with historically low business metrics, has his ring. Even Sid's contemporaries with shorter title reigns have been welcomed into the hall. Sid occupies an awkward position in wrestling's historical narrative. His career bridged the character-heavy 1980s and the edgier Attitude Era that followed. He wasn't quite the cartoon superhero of Hulkamania, nor the nuanced anti-hero that defined the late 1990s. Instead, Sid existed between wrestling's distinct generational identities, making his contribution harder to categorize in WWE's carefully curated mythology. This positioning makes Sid both historically significant and challenging to properly contextualize. He headlined against Hogan as the old guard faded, then later against Undertaker and Michaels as a new era dawned. Yet he's never given primary credit for either period's success. Wrestling documentaries focus on Hogan's twilight and Bret Hart's rise when recapping the early 1990s. In wrestling's reconstructed history, Sid becomes a supporting character in other wrestlers' stories rather than the protagonist of his own. The industry preaches passion and dedication, but Sid skipped this mythology. He showed up, got paid, and left when better opportunities arose. Ironically, promoters who publicly demanded loyalty couldn't resist throwing money at his imposing 6 feet 9 inches frame and natural intimidation factor. Sid bypassed wrestling's traditional dues-paying process. While others destroyed their bodies for $50 in high school gyms, he leveraged his physical presence for immediate six-figure contracts, making decisions based purely on financial gain rather than creative fulfillment. His most powerful negotiation tool wasn't his physique, but his genuine willingness to walk away, even for personal interests like softball. This shifted the power balance. Promoters knew his threats to leave were real because he'd proven it multiple times. In the end, Sid exposed wrestling's fundamental contradiction by treating it exactly as the business it is, not as the all-consuming passion its mythology demands. A philosophy he maintained until his death from cancer on August 26, 2024, at the age of 63. Next up, The Undertaker. What if I told you that the most feared wrestler in history is actually the most likable guy in the locker room? Yeah, we're talking about a guy who never broke character for 30 years, went through 17 surgeries just to make sure every match was perfect. So how exactly did a wrestler with an awful career start become the most respected WWE star ever? Well, let's hold on a second. To understand The Undertaker, let's take it back to March 24, 1965, when Mark William Calloway was born in the sprawling city of Houston, Texas. He was the youngest of 5 boys in the family. Already towering at 6'10" in high school, Mark dominated both basketball and football at Waltrip High. His height and talent earned him basketball scholarships, first to Angelina College, then to Texas Wesleyan University, where he starred for the Rams in 1985-86. Everyone expected him to keep playing basketball after college, but instead, wrestling called. He'd loved it since he was a kid, and in late 1986, he started training under veteran wrestler Buzz Sawyer. His first break came with World-Class Championship Wrestling, where he donned a mask and adopted the persona of Texas Red. His first match was a loss against the legendary Bruiser Brody with Percy Pringle, who'd later play a huge role in his career as his manager. Mark moved on to the Continental Wrestling Association, where Dutch Mantle took him under his wing. There, he tried out different characters like the Master of Pain and the Punisher. Success came quickly. As Master of Pain, he beat Jerry Lawler for the USWA World title. And as the Punisher, he won the WCWA Texas title from Eric Embry. Though new to wrestling, Mark carried himself like a pro and earned everyone's respect, quickly becoming known as someone you could count on in the ring. His growing reputation opened doors at World Championship Wrestling in 1990, where he emerged as Mean Mark Callis, embracing a darker, more mysterious persona. The character, as described by legendary announcer Jim Ross, was portrayed as an enigmatic figure with an affinity for Ozzy Osbourne's music and exotic snakes. This new direction led to a partnership with Dan Spivey, forming the imposing tag team known as the Skyscrapers. The duo quickly made their mark, particularly through their memorable feud with the legendary Road Warriors. However, his WCW journey took an unexpected turn when Ole Anderson, the promotion's lead booker, told him he'd never draw a dime in the wrestling business. Boy, was he wrong. Instead of giving up, Mark kept working while quietly planning his exit. During this time, he got a small part in Hulk Hogan's movie, Suburban Commando. This turned out to be huge. Hogan saw his potential and started pushing for WWE to sign him. When his WCW contract ended, he met with Vince McMahon. Surprisingly, the WWF chairman initially showed little enthusiasm for the future superstar. However, this skepticism quickly dissolved as McMahon got to know the performer, leading to a contract offer and the development of what would become one of wrestling's most iconic characters. The result was The Undertaker, a mysterious mortician from Death Valley who couldn't feel pain and put his beaten opponents in body bags. Now, it might seem obvious The Undertaker would work, but back then, most weird wrestling characters failed badly. What made this different was how completely he committed to the role. He tested it out at smaller shows as Kane the Undertaker before his big debut at Survivor Series on November 22nd. Walking out with Brother Love to that creepy music, he made an instant impact, destroying Coco Beware with his tombstone piledriver, then taking out Dusty Rhodes too. He dominated everyone in his path, scaring fans every time he showed up. Brother Love didn't last long as his manager. Instead, he reunited with Percy Pringle, who now played the creepy Paul Bearer. Bearer carried a mysterious urn that seemed to give The Undertaker his supernatural powers. The following spring brought WrestleMania on March 24, 1991, where he would initiate what would become a legendary streak by defeating Superfly Jimmy Snuka with his devastating tombstone finisher. Next came a big feud with Ultimate Warrior, which ended early when Warrior left WWE. But nothing could slow the dead man down. Even though he was supposed to be a bad guy, fans were starting to cheer for him. They couldn't help but be impressed. In a huge moment at the 1991 Survivor Series, he shocked everyone by beating Hulk Hogan for the WWE Championship. Though he lost the title days later because Ric Flair interfered, just beating Hogan showed how much WWE believed in their new star. The next year got even better. At WrestleMania 8, he kept his perfect record going by beating Jake the Snake Roberts so badly that Jake left WWE for 4 years. This feud turned the dead man into a good guy for the first time, and fans loved it. But things weren't all perfect. For a while, WWE kept putting him against really big guys who couldn't really wrestle well. Since his character had to act almost robot-like and not show pain, these matches weren't very exciting. He fought people like Kamala and Giant Gonzalez, barely beating Gonzalez by disqualification at WrestleMania 9 in 1993. It wasn't his best time, but he kept winning anyway. Things got better when he started fighting Yokozuna, leading to an exciting casket match at the 1994 Royal Rumble. Though he lost, the match ended with him mysteriously floating up to the heavens, a clever way to give him time off to heal his bad back. This meant missing WrestleMania for the first time, and he didn't return until SummerSlam. When he came back, he had to deal with a weird storyline where Ted DiBiase hired a fake Undertaker, played by Mark's friend Brian Lee. Behind the scenes, things were getting interesting too. While The Clique, a group consisting of Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Triple H, and Sean Waltman had a lot of power backstage, The Undertaker formed his own group called the Bone Street Crew. This included wrestlers like Yokozuna, Savio Vega, Charles Wright, the Godwins, and Rikishi. By this point, The Undertaker was so respected that even The Clique didn't mess with him. He became the judge of Wrestler's Court, a way wrestlers would solve their problems backstage when someone broke the unwritten rules. Outside the ring, Mark was starting a family, marrying his first wife Jody Lynn and welcoming their son Gunner. Meanwhile, his character was evolving from a spooky Undertaker into something more powerful, a gothic figure who could control lightning and manipulate the arena's lights with just a wave of his hands. This new version of the character helped him continue his success. At WrestleMania 11 in April 1995, he beat King Kong Bundy, adding another win to his streak. Shortly after, he had to wear a protective mask because of an injured eye socket, but kept wrestling through his ongoing feud with Ted DiBiase's group. By late '95, he moved back into main events, facing off against Diesel at WrestleMania 12, where he made it 5-0 at the Big Show. But the next night changed everything when Mankind debuted. Unlike anyone before him, Mankind actually got the upper hand against The Undertaker multiple times. Their rivalry led to a brutal boiler room brawl at SummerSlam 1996, where Mankind not only won the match but also convinced Paul Bearer to turn against The Undertaker. It was the first time the dead man seemed truly vulnerable. The rivalry reached new heights at In Your House, Buried Alive in October 1996, where they fought in the first ever Buried Alive match. Though he ended up buried that night, true to his character, the dead man wouldn't stay down. He returned at Survivor Series just weeks later, now looking more demonic than ever as the Lord of Darkness. After finally beating Mankind, he set his sights on bigger goals in early 1997. Following some controversy at that year's Royal Rumble, he earned a shot at the WWE Championship against Psycho Sid at WrestleMania 13. That night, he both won his second WWE title and extended his WrestleMania streak to 6-0. Then came what would become his most memorable storyline yet. Paul Bearer returned, wanting to manage the new champion. When The Undertaker refused, Bearer threatened to reveal a dark secret from his past if he didn't agree. This blackmail would lead to one of WWE's biggest stories ever. The champion reluctantly let Bearer back into his life, but eventually couldn't take the manipulation anymore and refused to work with him. That's when Bearer dropped the bombshell. The Undertaker had a brother named Kane, who was still alive and wanted revenge. It was classic WWE drama at its finest. For months, Bearer kept warning everyone that Kane was coming, revealing that The Undertaker had started a fire years ago that killed their parents and severely burned Kane. While this story played out in the background, the dead man kept defending his WWE title through spring and summer. The pressure finally got to him, though, and he lost the belt to Bret Hart at SummerSlam 1997. Things got even worse when he started a bitter feud with Shawn Michaels, leading to the first ever Hell in a Cell match at In Your House Bad Blood that October. The match would go down as one of WWE's greatest ever, showing everyone that Mark Calaway could really wrestle when given the chance. But just when it seemed The Undertaker would win, Kane finally appeared and cost his brother the victory. Kane's return haunted The Undertaker, as his brother and Paul Bearer kept demanding a match. But The Undertaker refused to fight his own flesh and blood, so Kane took out his anger on other wrestlers instead, destroying both Mankind and Vader. For a moment, it seemed like the brothers might actually reconcile. When DX was making The Undertaker's life miserable, Kane showed up to help him, and everyone thought the family drama was finally over. But it was all a trap. At the Royal Rumble during The Undertaker's casket match against Shawn Michaels, Kane turned on his brother. He not only cost him the match, but trapped him in the casket and set it on fire. Of course, being The Undertaker, he somehow survived. After disappearing for a few weeks, he returned right before WrestleMania 14 with a message. He'd finally face his brother at WWE's biggest show. At WrestleMania, The Undertaker faced his toughest challenge yet in Kane, but still won after hitting 3 tombstone piledrivers, making his streak 7-0. Their feud wasn't over, though. Next month, they met in WWE's first ever Inferno match, which The Undertaker also won. While Kane moved on to chase Steve Austin's WWE title, The Undertaker renewed his rivalry with Mankind. This led to one of wrestling's most shocking moments ever at King of the Ring. During their Hell in a Cell match, they started on top of the cage, and The Undertaker threw Mankind off, sending him crashing through an announce table 16 feet below. The chaos continued when he later chokeslammed Mankind through the cage itself. After that, he set his sights on champion Steve Austin, Things got interesting when they were forced to become tag team champions together while building to their title match. By SummerSlam on August 30th, any teamwork was gone as they fought for the belt. Leading up to the match, it seemed The Undertaker had finally made peace with Kane. Though Kane didn't get involved and Austin won the match, it soon became clear afterward that the brothers had truly reunited. By October, everything changed again. The Undertaker turned on Kane, reunited with Paul Bearer, and finally admitted he'd killed their parents. His character transformed into a dark priest who sat on an evil throne, leading a group called the Ministry of Darkness. This sinister crew included the Acolytes, the Brood, Midian, Viscera, and the Big Show. The Ministry storyline really heated up in 1999 when The Undertaker set his sights on Vince McMahon himself. In a story that mixed reality and fiction, he tried to take over WWE, while Vince accused him of losing himself in his character. The war got intense, with the dead man terrorizing the entire McMahon family. Things got even darker when he hanged the Big Boss Man at WrestleMania 15 during a Hell in a Cell match, which made his streak 8-0, though fans try to forget this one. Then he tried to force Stephanie McMahon into marriage during a creepy ceremony on Raw that April. He claimed a mysterious, higher power was behind it all, pulling the Ministry's strings from the shadows. Stone Cold stopped the wedding, which led to another title match between them at Over the Edge. The Undertaker won his third WWE Championship that night. 2 weeks later came the big reveal. Vince McMahon was the mysterious higher power all along. Even today, fans consider this one of WWE's worst plot twists ever. His title reign didn't last long, though. On June 28th's Raw, in what became WWE's highest-rated segment ever at that time, Stone Cold won the belt back. The Ministry fell apart after that, and The Undertaker started teaming with Big Show, taking the younger wrestler under his wing. They even won the tag team titles twice together. During this time, The Undertaker started looking less like a dark priest and more like his real-life self. Kevin Nash claimed this change happened because The Undertaker was planning to jump to WCW, though that seems unlikely given both WCW's struggles and The Undertaker's loyalty to WWE. Whatever the real reason, he took some time off in September 1999 to heal a groin injury and marry his second wife, Sarah. When he returned at Judgment Day in May 2000, fans saw a completely different Undertaker, the American Badass. The dead man was gone, replaced by a tough-talking biker who rode to the ring on a Harley-Davidson wearing denim and leather. Kid Rock's American Badass, later Limp Bizkit's Rollin', became his entrance music. Though it was a huge change, fans quickly embraced this new version of The Undertaker, breathing fresh life into a character that should have gotten stale years ago. This new style made him even more dominant. After a quick feud with Kane, they reunited as the Brothers of Destruction. On his own, freed from his old character's limitations, he was finally having great matches with stars like Kurt Angle, The Rock, and Triple H. His feud with Triple H led to what many consider his best WrestleMania match yet, making his streak 9-0 at WrestleMania 17. Surprisingly, it was around this time that someone backstage first noticed he'd never lost at WrestleMania. While the streak seems planned now, those first 9 wins were just luck. Before his next WrestleMania chance, he stayed busy. He and Kane won the tag team titles on the April 19th SmackDown and feuded with Steve Austin and Triple H's two-man power trip. Then came the WCW invasion, a storyline that would disappoint pretty much everyone. During the invasion, he had forgettable feuds with Diamond Dallas Page, who they made look weak, and Chronic, leading to one of wrestling's worst tag matches. The bright spot was winning the WCW tag team titles with Kane and helping WWE win at Survivor Series that November. Outside the ring, he and his wife Sarah welcomed 2 daughters, Chasey and Gracie. Meanwhile, after the invasion ended, he surprised everyone by turning bad guy again. Now calling himself Big Evil, he basically played up being the toughest guy in WWE and dared anyone to test him. At the 2002 Royal Rumble, rookie Maven shocked everyone by eliminating him. Instead of burying the newcomer, The Undertaker used this to help make Maven look good, showing why he was so respected backstage. His kindness to younger talent paid off when he got a dream match against Ric Flair at WrestleMania 18, where he made his streak 10 EO. The first WWE draft sent him to Raw, where he quickly beat Hulk Hogan for the Undisputed Championship. As champion, he defended the belt on both shows and helped build up younger stars like Jeff Hardy. His reign ended at Vengeance in July when The Rock won a triple threat match that also included Kurt Angle. After losing the title, he moved to SmackDown and helped make Brock Lesnar look strong, putting on a great Hell in a Cell match at No Mercy that October, where they never had to leave the cage. He took a break after that, returning in early 2003 to mentor newcomer Nathan Jones for what was planned as a WrestleMania 19 tag match against Big Show and A-Train. The plans changed when it became clear Jones wasn't ready for TV. Instead, The Undertaker fought alone at WrestleMania, beating both opponents to make his streak 11-0. But fans were getting restless. They wanted the dead man back instead of this biker character. He spent the rest of 2003 having solid matches with John Cena, Kurt Angle, and Brock Lesnar before losing to Vince McMahon in a Buried Alive match at Survivor Series that November. The loss gave him time to rethink his character and mourn his father's passing. When he returned at WrestleMania 20 in March 2004, fans got what they wanted. The dead man was back, but with a twist. This version kept some of his biker attitude, letting him keep putting on great matches. With Paul Bearer back by his side, he beat Kane for the second time at WrestleMania, making it 12-0. After WrestleMania, he kept Paul Bearer around while feuding with the Dudley Boys, JBL, and Randy Orton. The Orton rivalry would lead to WrestleMania 21, where the streak really became a major storyline. With Orton's legend killer character and rising star status, many fans actually thought he might end the streak. This match created the formula for future WrestleMania matches, intense near falls that kept fans guessing until the end. The Undertaker won again, making it 13-0. His matches were getting better too, thanks to his growing interest in MMA. He started using moves like the Gogoplata, adding a new layer of realism to his fights. 2005 saw him in a controversial feud with Muhammad Hassan that had to be cut short when a terrorist-themed segment aired on the same day as the London bombings. He went back to feuding with Orton after that, actually losing to him at both SummerSlam and No Mercy that fall. After disappearing for a month, he returned at Survivor Series wanting one more match with Orton, this time inside Hell in a Cell. Leading up to this match, the supernatural side of his character came back strong. He started doing creepy things like possessing backstage interviewers to send messages to Orton. The mind games worked. He beat Orton at Hell in a Cell that December, ending their rivalry for good. Looking for new challenges, he faced Kurt Angle in early 2006. In a rare showing of respect, he actually tapped out to Angle's ankle lock. WrestleMania 22 was supposed to feature another match with Angle, who was planned to end the streak. Plans changed though, and while Angle went after the World Heavyweight title, The Undertaker faced Mark Henry in a quick casket match instead, making it 14-0. Then came a rough patch, trying to get good matches out of the Great Khali. Even The Undertaker couldn't make that work. Despite having proven himself as a great wrestler, he had to power through these lackluster matches at Judgment Day and on SmackDown that August. Things improved when he started feuding with Mr. Kennedy. Their program ran through the rest of the year, featuring First Blood and ambulance matches. He even brought Kane back to team up against Kennedy and MVP. By 2007, he set his sights on his first Royal Rumble win. Entering at number 30, he found himself face-to-face with Shawn Michaels in the final two, their first encounter since the late 90s. After several close calls, he finally eliminated HBK to earn a shot at Batista's World Heavyweight title at WrestleMania 23. The WrestleMania match delivered. After 16 intense minutes, he both kept his streak alive at 15-0 and won the World Heavyweight Championship. This started a golden period. For the next 6 years, his WrestleMania matches would consistently steal the show and build the streak's legend. His title reign lasted until May 11th, when Edge cashed in Money in the Bank and took the belt. The loss allowed him to heal a bicep injury, keeping him off TV until September. He returned to face Mark Henry briefly, before jumping back into the title picture with Edge and Batista, fighting in both a Hell in a Cell match at Survivor Series and a triple threat at Armageddon, though he couldn't recapture the gold. Looking for another title shot, he entered the 2008 Royal Rumble, starting at number 1 against Shawn Michaels at number 2. This time, HBK got revenge, eliminating him. The Undertaker bounced back next month, winning an Elimination Chamber match against Batista, Finlay, Great Khali, MVP, and Big Daddy V to earn a WrestleMania match against Edge. At WrestleMania 24, he put on another classic, making Edge tap out after 24 minutes to win the World Heavyweight title and push his streak to 16-0. He defended against Edge at Backlash, but Vicky Guerrero's interference got the title vacated. Their feud continued through summer, ending at SummerSlam in Hell in a Cell when he chokeslammed Edge from a ladder through the ring. He moved on to feuds with Big Show and Jeff Hardy until Shawn Michaels made a challenge. HBK believed he could end the streak. Their WrestleMania 25 match was billed as Heaven vs. Hell. Michaels, the born-again Christian in white descending from above, against the demonic Undertaker rising from below. What followed is considered by many the greatest match ever. After 30 intense minutes, the dead man made it 17-0. He took 4 months off after this career peak, returning to chase CM Punk's World Heavyweight title. He won it inside Hell in a Cell that October, holding it until the next February's Elimination Chamber. That night started badly when Pyro accidentally burned his chest and face. It ended worse when Shawn Michaels interfered, helping Chris Jericho take his title. HBK was obsessed with getting another shot after his loss. After failing to win the Royal Rumble, he cost Undertaker the title to force a rematch. The Undertaker agreed, but with one condition: if Michaels lost at WrestleMania 26, he had to retire. Their streak versus career match headlined WrestleMania. Some fans thought it even topped their first match, but either way, after 24 minutes, HBK's career ended as the streak reached 18-0. The Undertaker took time off to heal his aging body, returning to feud with Kane over the World Heavyweight title. Knowing his career was winding down, he put Kane over strong, losing 3 straight pay-per-view matches before taking more time off for rotator cuff surgery. He made it back for WrestleMania 27, where Triple H challenged him to avenge Shawn Michaels. Though he won to make it 19-0, the match told a new story. The dead man barely survived, needing help to leave while Triple H walked out on his own. This led to their WrestleMania 28 rematch, dubbed the End of an Era. After not wrestling for a full year, The Undertaker would face Triple H in Hell in a Cell, with HBK as referee. The story was clear. Keeping the streak alive was getting harder with age. For over 30 minutes, they told an incredible story. Everyone believed the streak might end when Undertaker barely kicked out of a Sweet Chin Music pedigree combo, but he survived to make it 20-0. The match was so perfect that Mick Foley begged him to retire right there, saying he'd never top it. He didn't listen. Though he had another good match beating CM Punk at WrestleMania 29 to reach 21-0, age was clearly catching up to him. After mostly staying away from the ring for a year, he returned at WrestleMania 30 to face Brock Lesnar. Nobody thought Lesnar would win. Surely the streak would end with a young star getting the spotlight. That's why the arena fell silent when Brock hit his third F5 and got the pin. After 24 years, the streak was over. Like wrestling's Red Wedding, it proved the dead man was mortal after all. Brock used the win to become WWE's final boss, a role he still holds today. But The Undertaker wasn't done. He returned at WrestleMania 31 to beat Bray Wyatt, then had a surprisingly good Hell in a Cell match with Lesnar that summer. By WrestleMania 32, though, when he fought Shane McMahon in a disappointing match, it was clear his best days were behind him. Everyone could see he needed to retire, but out of respect, nobody would tell him. By then, Mark Calloway knew he'd missed his perfect exit and became obsessed with finding one last great match. His body wasn't cooperating, though. At WrestleMania 33, his match with Roman Reigns was rough to watch. His bad hips made it clear he shouldn't have been wrestling. The next year's match with John Cena only went 3 minutes because of his limitations. He tried getting back in shape for matches in Saudi Arabia, but these turned out even worse, especially his bout with Goldberg and a tag match with Kane against DX. He had a decent showing teaming with Roman Reigns against Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre at Extreme Rules 2019. but it still wasn't the send-off he wanted. Finally, at WrestleMania 36, he got his perfect ending against AJ Styles. The pandemic forced them to get creative with the Boneyard match, which cleverly worked around his physical limits while celebrating all his characters: the Dead Man, American Badass, and Mark Calloway himself. After winning and making his WrestleMania record 25-2, he seemed ready to retire. Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold, Steve Austin, John Cena, Roman Reigns. The faces of WWE changed, but they all had to step into the dead man's domain. Each generation's top star learned the same hard truth. They might have ruled WWE for a time, but they were always walking in the Undertaker's yard. And that yard, sacred ground built on 4 decades of darkness, respect, and legend, will forever belong to him and him alone.